Прийшли окупанти до нас в Україну, форма новенька, воєнні машини, та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російські танкісти сховались в кущі, щоб лаптем посьорбати довбані щі, та трохи у чах перегрівся навар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Приперли зі сходу до нас барани для восстановлення
великої страны.
Найкращий пастух баранячий хотар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Ті, хто воде всяке озброєння різне, потужні ракети, машини залізні, у нас на всі доводи є коментар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Вони захопити хотіли нас зразу, а ми зачаїли на орків образу з російських бандитів, робить примар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російська поліція справи заводить, там вбивцю рашистів ніяк не знаходить, хто винен, що в нашому полі глухар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Веде пропаганду кремлівський урод, слова пропаганди ковтає народ, тепер нове слово знає цар.
Байрактар.
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 Yes.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
Русский военный корабль. Предлагаю сложить оружие и сдаться. Русский военный корабль, иди нахуй.
Наші
шануєм і ми, браття, у своїй сторонці. І душу й тіло ми положим за нашу свободу. І покажем, що ми браття козацького
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 525 of the news. And it's good to see you all once again. And of course, we always have big news, and tonight is no exception.
And of course, we're going to be covering the past 24 hours of the news of the war in Ukraine. And today has probably been one of the highest loss days we have ever seen for the Russian army on film as far as tank losses have gone. Of course, there have been some days earlier on in the war when you saw masses of Russian tanks lining the streets as burned out husks, but today is giving all of those days a run for their money. As y'all will see, as we move down the front line today, there are burning piles of Russian tanks just about everywhere. And not only that, all of them were lost today, which was incredibly impressive to see. But nevertheless, there is loads of news to cover, and probably one of the more interesting ones in the international news circuit is that the Baltic states are going to be cut off from the Russian-Belarusian electrical generating grid in 2025. This is actually a major ordeal, and some people may think, that sounds kind of mundane to just be cutting one off of a power grid. But cutting a nation off of another one's power grid is actually one of the largest deals that can really occur on a diplomatic and economic scale at the exact same time. According from the information that we have gotten today, and making sure that we get it correct, Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia will be disconnected from the energy systems of Russia and Belarus in 2025. Baltic grid operators have signed an agreement on synchronization with Western Europe in February 2025. They will not renew their contract with the Brel operating system inside of Russia and Belarus.
It's about time, man. It's about time. I got some flack earlier for giving some criticism to the Baltic states, but I explained that all earlier, but I would like to discuss that again later during the question segment.
I still think this is a good move, however, and certainly one that's important as far as strategic goals are concerned. Having the Baltic states heavily reliant on Russian and Belarusian electrical grids is something that could pose a massive strategic risk if a war was to break out, considering they are NATO countries. The deprivation of power generation and the transfer of electricity to their grids may become an imminent reality within the first 24 hours of conflict and could seriously hinder the war industry and also the logistical side of things inside of the Baltic states. And so the fact that they are going to be transferring themselves over to Western electrical grids by the year 2025 is a massive step forward for the Baltic states, and also a massive step in ensuring that NATO security is kept in place and also further fortified through further strategic, economic, and diplomatic planning. So overall, an amazing piece of news, one that will of course be occurring over the next few years, but great to hear that that process will already begin, and hopefully we'll see that in effect soon. However, moving on from some things that are somewhat mundane and on to things that are far more exciting, the Ukrainians have been continuing their attacks on Russian supply depots and strategic infrastructure inside the Crimean Peninsula, which has largely become, at this point, a ripe target for the Ukrainians, with no way to get a large or consistent amount of supplies into the Crimean Peninsula. All supplies that are there are truly perishable as they go. They are no longer replaceable or renewable in any form in any sense of the form. They are what they are right now. They will be either used up by the Russian forces or destroyed before the Russians can even use them, and the chances of replacements are going to be quite low. And the Ukrainians have once again capitalized on this right outside of the major town of Simferopol, found right in the middle of Crimea, where another Ukrainian strike has hit another Russian supply base, knocking it out and largely wiping it off the map from what we can tell. But here's the clip. We can see that this was taken from a Russian motor pool, as the explosion has just happened and it was still knocking out windows. And from what we understand, this was a supply base that was attached to an airfield. So this is once again going to be trying to attack the two most fragile forces of Russia inside of Crimea. And here comes the next missile and explosion right there. It's once again attacking the Navy or the Air Force. Those two are the ones that are the most fragile inside of Crimea, and destroying their supply lines will ensure that the Russian Navy and the Russian Air Force are hardly able to function from the Crimean Peninsula.
Она тут прям пролетела.
We can hear the Russian soldier talking a little bit as he continues to walk his way out of the motor pool, and most likely closer towards desertion.
Охуеть.
And we now see him walking forward after he believes that both of the missiles have stricken. And from what we understand, it was only 2 missiles. Of course, Russian air defenses were completely hopeless in stopping these attacks, whatever they may be, whether it be drone or missile, and it appears that some significant damage was caused to that supply base, and we may try and get a little bit more information later, although I have to admit, understanding the actual impact onto Russian logistics and strategic bases is very hard to ascertain in the middle of a war due to the fact that the Russians try and keep that as quiet as possible, and if the United States ever gets access to that information, or the Western world at all gets access to that information, it will most likely remain classified, so that way Russia does not know how deep or how effective Western intelligence goes inside of the Russian army. So, unfortunately, we probably won't be getting exact details on that, but supply bases being hit are very important, quite critical. From what we understand, once again, that was a logistics base attached to the Russian Air Force near the area of Simferopol, and from what we understand, at some point, the Russian Air Force had left Crimea earlier in the war due to some air bases being hit and a large amount of high-tech aircraft being destroyed, and now they have brought some of those air wings back. Not all of them, but some of them, and one of them was based around Simferopol. It is a close air support unit, meaning that it is mostly carrying unguided rockets, bombs, and things of similar natures. No air combatant roles largely in this air wing, from what we understand, near Simferopol. And so this is ensuring that the Russians' ability to operate Su-25s, Su-34s, or any other ground attack aircraft with all of the ordnance that they would need to conduct their mission successfully will be massively hindered, and they'll have to reduce the number of missions that those aircraft can fly, if they are even flying them at all. But moving on from Crimea, where we saw some incredible news today, we're now going to be moving on into Moldova, a neutral country, not a part of NATO, not a part of the Russian world either. It does have a Russian puppet inside of it called Transnistria here on the eastern border of the Moldovan state, but nonetheless, it is largely a neutral country officially, but it appears that the Moldovan people are not neutral with the football chants. They make it pretty clear who they dislike. And so, here is the Moldovan football chant of the week. Oh no.
Oh my goodness.
That is the sound of thousands of people being put on the window list. Oh no. But still.
Oh dear.
Oh man. Oh man. Oh dear. But still, very nice to hear that the Moldovans are not big fans of Putin. And of course, they are certainly not big fans of Putin or Russia for that matter at all. The Moldovans have a very big reason to not be a fan of the Russians, considering that almost 1/3 of their nation's landmass is a fake, non-recognized puppet country called I believe it's the Republic of Transnistria, that exists with its capital in Tiraspol, and it just encompasses the entire slither here on the eastern side of Moldova, from north to south. This little thing is an attempt to try and keep the Moldovan Soviet Socialist Republic alive, but it doesn't really do much, and also it relies heavily on Russian forces in the thousands being in Transnistria to stop them from being curb-stomped by the Moldovans. And this has led to a lot of resentment over the years, considering that this is a completely illegitimate country that the Russians continue to foster and provide for inside of their own borders, and so they are almost in the same category as really any other Western country or NATO country. They dislike the Russians with a pretty large passion, and I gotta say, can't really blame them. Moving on from Moldova, however, and moving towards the border of Belgrade, we have also seen something fairly interesting. Many folks know that border raids have started to become a little bit more of a normal occurrence in between Ukraine and Russia, and specifically from what we now label as the Russian Liberation Army, which are partisan groups made up of Russian citizens or Russian nationals that are inside of Ukraine but conduct border raids and occupy areas of the Russian border region for as long as they possibly can, inflicting as much damage on the Russian border guards as possible, and also trying to recruit more members, and then once they get a little bit of pushback, they begin to leave. This has caused a massive concern for the Russians because, as the Wagner coup shows, and also as those border raids show, they don't really have any armed forces left to protect their own border region. And they don't really have any armed forces anywhere that would actually pose any kind of a resistance to anything coming into the country. And so what the Russians have begun to do is that they pulled a page out of the Ukrainian playbook, funnily enough, and they have begun to raise territorial defense forces, TDFs. Some of y'all may remember those. Those have largely turned into actual full-on infantry units in the Ukrainian army, but way early on in the war, territorial defense forces were impromptu hodgepodge groups of Ukrainians that were thrown together with weapons of really any kind that they were given, and then given the task to defend their front line. And damn it, they did it a good job back in the day. They were actually giving every Russian unit a run for their money back when the TDFs were founded. But it appears that the Russians are trying to do the same thing. And whether it'll be successful or not, I have a feeling it won't be. But here are their TDFs, and here's what the TDFs are doing in the Belgorod region. Of course, Russian cameras only film in 240p. Welcome back to 2009. It's the very dawn of YouTube, and cameras are a brand new thing.
Oh, look, they have DJI drones.
Look, it's an H&K G11. That literally looks like a G11 right there.
What is that, like a shell or something for the anti-drone gun?
I think it is. I think so. But that thing is ugly. He's like, see, it's a block of plastic. We made it ourselves. We now see them flying their drones around. Of course, you know, it's the run-of-the-mill kind of drone.
Look, Bliat, the drone does work. I can even hold it in my hand, Bliat.
Look, we have.
It costs 1 million rubles.
Wait a minute. These aren't Toyotas. These are those cheap Russian pickups, aren't they?
Yep, those definitely aren't Toyotas.
Man, this thing's got like 30 horsepower. A moped could outspeed this thing. And then they got
the suspension's probably rigid as hell too, like no travel at all.
Man, it's like that $3,000 Chinese truck that's the size of a go-kart, and it still has like the welding sprigs like sticking off of it in some places because the welding job is so garbage.
Yes.
Oh, look at this! Someone's getting a little award. Uh-oh. Here you go, shake hands with people, take picture. Oh wait, what kind of rifle is that? That's a AK-74, kind of normal one. Okay, you got it. Alright. And that's the end of the clip. But there was a little look at the Belgorod TDFs. As you can see, they don't really look that well put together. They have a couple of drones and some rifles, and that appears to be all they're getting at the moment, at least according to this film. And so we can assume that the TDF is serving as almost a paramilitary police force, if anything. If we could compare its force to anything else, probably looks a lot like the Belarusian army does, in all honesty at this point. We also understand that a similar TDF is being raised in the Kursk Oblast as well as the Bryansk Oblasts, but their effectiveness is completely unknown. Of course, that video shows that they are poorly equipped and don't really have any real way to stop the Russian Liberation Army if they are to cross back over the border. They are going to be blowing straight through these guys, and I don't even think these guys are going to stick around to wait for the Russian Liberation Army to show up. So take that for what you will. The Russians are trying, though. I just don't think that's going to be a good attempt if we've ever seen one. We're now going to be moving on into our location unknowns, and we've had some pretty good ones today. So starting off with our first one, we saw that the Ukrainians were able to take out a surveillance tower today. Unfortunately, we are going to have to mute the audio, and also you can hear whatever the hell that was. Alright, so that's is Queen. Very copyrighted. You see, that's the queen of copyright right there. And we can see the drone flying in.
That's the Da Vinci's.
Da Vinci?
Yeah, 305.
Man, you're listening to Da Vinci 305, and we can see them hitting the surveillance equipment here on the tower. And hopefully, we get a better look at it, huh? And we can see the tower here. The drone is going to be flying in to about what we understood to be right there, and we can see the smoke plume coming off the tower, showing that it was a successful hit. We can now see another drone coming in at a much higher part of the tower, and it appears to be hitting the very top relay just about, and we can now see the footage of it hitting I don't really know what that one was going for, to be quite honest with y'all, but it did hit and explode. Well, that's the end of that clip right there. Very nice to see them.
I'm gonna get flamed for the typo in the poll. I can see it right now.
Let's see. I gotta read it.
The grain doll.
The grain doll.
It's supposed to say grain deal, but I don't know what the hell I was thinking.
Dude,
Had a minor strunk.
That sounds like something, man, from Star Wars, where they go to a planet where grain is like worshipped, and we have to meet the grain doll. It's like some leader in like some very elaborate clothes or something. But anyways, moving on from that. Here is some work from the SBU. Some of y'all may be interested to know this, but the SBU was founded on $250,000. Did you know that, Matthew?
The who?
The SBU, the Ukrainian SBU. They were
They
founded.
had $500,000?
They were only founded on $250,000. About the price of an average U.S. home was the amount that they had to form their unit and then begin to knock out Russian forces. And from what the Ukrainians have stated, the SBU has been able to destroy over $1 billion of Russian equipment after starting off on a humble budget of $250,000. We don't know how much they've gotten over their history of existence, but the fact that they did start the unit with only $250,000 says that the SBU, has to be one of the most economical units in destroying Russian forces that we've seen so far. And so, here's the clip. Oh, and we're going to be muting that because that is copyrighted to hell in back. And we can now see the burned out Russian tanks. And this is largely a bit of a compilation of the work of the SBU. And of course, they did all of this with just simple drones for the most part. It is largely a drone-based unit as far as it goes with facing down Russian forces. And TB said $250,000 for a house and gave like a bit of a miffed face. Yeah, I don't really think that is the median house price in the United States anymore, but we're going to say that just to make it sound neat.
Man, $250,000 is considered cheap in Birmingham, Alabama, or at least for here.
Man, $250,000. I mean, hell, that won't really get you much in the modern world anymore. I mean, you know, the house has gone up in price. But anyways, with that, y'all can see that the SBU was able to knock out a pretty decent amount of vehicles. And of course, according to the Ukrainians, over $1 billion of equipment has been destroyed by the SBU. An amazing bit of work by them. And of course, it is great to know that they're also fighting the Russians economically. And I know that many people are like, oh, that's terrible to equate the valuable lives of people to dollars. But the thing is, and you know, this kind of sounds a little bit morbid, but money, as far as war goes, is actually more important than the people in the war itself. Because with the money, you can fight the war for however long you need, as long as you have people. And it doesn't really work the other way around. You may have plenty of people, but if you don't have a lot of money, you won't really be able to fight the war for long. And so it is great to know, it's absolutely incredible to know, that the Ukrainians are spending pennies and they are costing the Russians fortunes, massive amounts of money, and that will hopefully be, of course, hurting the Russian pursers a little bit more, and hopefully leading them to not really be able to financially cope with this war for much longer than they could. And so with that, we are going to be moving on into our next clip, where we also saw that the Ukrainians captured a really cool Russian armored car. I haven't really seen this one much, but it is a BMP-97 Vistral MRAP. And that's it right there.
That's pretty cool, I gotta say.
I'm not gonna lie, that thing does look pretty neat. So let's type in BMP-97, and let's see what we can get on this thing. So, let's see, the BMP-97, Russian military designation for the KAMAZ of 43-26-9 Vistral 4x4 wheeled mine-resistant ambush-protected the MRAP. It is produced and fitted with several different turrets, like the one of the BTR-80. So apparently there's some that can fit a 30mm autocannon on top. This one has a machine gun turret up there, and this one also appears to be the enlarged sedan version of the BMP-97. But a really weird-looking vehicle. And here's a map of the operators: Syria, Kazakhstan, I believe that would be Azerbaijan, and then the Russian Federation. And those are the only operators, but now they need to add Ukraine to the list, because it appears that they have been able to politely acquire a few. But good God, that camouflage right there is not doing it any favors. They just call it the puke vomit color camo. Like, what the hell is it supposed to be hiding you from? Like, that doesn't even...
Hell if I know. It's like designed to be driven into like a fire zone or something with those colors on it.
Dude, that wouldn't work for the desert, the forest, a beach. I don't even know what kind of camo that would be. That's just hideous. There's a more conventional camo. That actually kind of appears to be a Belarusian camo with the tricolor it has, but that, I believe, is also a Russian camo as well. But let's see here. the driver's position. Oh my god, dude. They've only had these things for how long? Since 1999? Wow, they've had these things for a pretty long time, actually, like 24 years. But look, it's already rusted over up there.
Man, that is a strange looking position. Let's say they have some AC vents over there on the passenger side.
I mean, yeah, but you know, this thing actually looks pretty bare bones on the inside. It doesn't look like Western vehicles where it's actually kind of like fleshed out and there was some work put on the interior. That's like a bucket seat, and then it's just the steel frame, and that's it.
Man, they just literally stapled the leather onto the back of that seat frame. Like
Oh,
it's
yeah,
literally
they-
just like stapled on.
Dude, it doesn't even look like they actually stapled it. It looks like they got like the staple clip, you know, where they're all attached to each other, and they just kind of bended them around to make it work. I mean, that is.
And they got like some kind of like I don't even know what the hell that steering wheel is from, but that's definitely not standard for that vehicle. I can tell you that.
Dude, that's that Forza Horizon like gaming steering wheel that you get for Xbox that they got right there. Good
Yeah.
lord. Man, this thing is actually pretty jank on the inside. I mean, it looks cool on the outside, I will admit. I'm not going to deny that. But that thing is jank as hell on the inside. Like, it's like they hardly even put any effort into this thing. Yeah, that looks bad. That actually looks really, really bad from this angle. It's literally just an open cab. You know, there's nothing in there or anything. Yeah,
It's definitely sketchy on the inside of it. I'll have to zonk the interior. The exterior kind of looks okay, but the more I look at it, I'm really not liking it that much.
Dude, they got that Baofeng MRAP out here. It's like, yeah, I don't know. But anyways, moving on from a little bit of info about the BMP 97. Now that looking at it, it's not as impressive as it was, which is the story of every Russian piece of equipment. But you can see the Ukrainians driving one by and also using it to tow off an MTLB. And we can see that MTLB right there. And we can now see these guys riding in, I believe it's a medic van. We see them passing by a damaged Lada, very unfortunate. But, of course, Ladas are a dime a dozen. Also a destroyed BTR-80. And that means only one thing. It was Russian. Whoop, whoop. And we now see them driving a little bit further down the road. A real Lada. Now, that is a legit Lada, as real as they get.
A whole lot of garbage.
That's, yeah. Man, dude, nothing, though, can beat the Trabant. The Trabant is truly the worst.
Man, they make some terrible cars. I'm telling you.
Oh man! And also, by the way, just to give y'all a little bit of a story here about the Trabant, because some of y'all may or may not know what a Trabant is. This is the East German car of the day, and let me see if I can find y'all a good picture of this thing. Here we go. Man, well, nah, we'll get another one that's a larger picture. So there we have it. That is a picture of a Trabant in Dresden, which was one of the largest cities in East Germany. This thing is terrible. I think it has like 20 or 30 horsepower or something like that. It's like nothing. It's incredibly small. It could probably only fit about 2 people comfortably. If you even tried to fit 4 people in there, I think they would literally just die from being crushed to death. Trabants are terrible. Probably one of the worst cars ever made in history, I would argue. It's even worse than the BMW Isetta, and I think that thing was honestly just goofy. But this thing is even far worse than that. But let me see if I can get...
The Trabant was the car for the commies, wasn't it?
Oh yeah, it was the commie car. I think a lot of these actually got exported to Cuba from East Germany, but they are terrible. Here's a picture actually of Doug DeMuro, who I believe is around, what is he, 6'1", 6'2"?
This is a Trabant.
Yeah.
And we're going to explore the quirks and features of the Trabant.
The very little quirks that this thing had, or features. But look how small this thing is. That thing in America would be called a go-kart at best. That thing is hardly even full-sized. That thing's a midget car for like little people.
It really is.
It's a
and you
terrible
can find
car.
one on Cars and Bids.
Could we? I mean,
I don't know.
I wonder how much these things even cost. Like, you know, I bet it's like only, well, you know, knowing collectible cars, I bet you it's like $20,000. But I feel like this thing is only worth like $1,000 maybe at best, because it is just horrendous. But anyways, also, by the way, that's an Isetta. That's a BMW Isetta right there, just in case you're all wondering what I said also was bad. But enough car talk. Anyways, that's kind of like the comparable thing to the Lada in the communist world is the Trabant, but the Trabant was far worse off than even the Lada. But anyways, moving on from that and into our next one, we had a really cute video to show y'all today of some of the puppies of Ukraine. Check out these cute puppies.
Солдат спит, служба идет.
They sleep on the kit.
Да? Лохматые воины.
Dang, man, those dogs are
Как
sound
наряд в
asleep.
спите.
Man, you better not disturb their slumber either because they strapped. They got that whole AK beside them.
They sure do. They even got that little bow fang with the stock antenna on it.
Bing chilling. But anyways, moving on from that. Very cute little video. Some really cute puppies. And we're now going to be moving on into the Russian casualty report. Matthew, brace yourself. It's not going to be good today.
Oh man, they went to 0. Man, kind of like the ruble.
Okay, that was actually pretty good. But
Damn,
do we have-
man, I had to put the low blow on him because the ruble I found out today is so worthless. It's like worth pennies on the dollar. But you know, that's another topic for another time.
And it appears that we also have like no memes, which is understandable because there were no bobcats at all. But anyways, moving on.
I know there were some memes, but Twitter isn't displaying them like usual. But I saw some earlier though. I did see them. Don't forget, folks. I did see them.
And we appreciate the memes. We really do. And moving on from that and on into this casualty report, it's been pretty good today, actually. Beyond the Bobcats being lost, apparently that was a sacrifice today to just get bulk of everything else nearly. We saw that 540 Russian soldiers were liquidated over the past 24 hours, along with 8 armored personnel carriers, a whopping 25 supply trucks, 1 main battle tank, only 1, that's also one of the lower categories of the day, an entire 27 artillery pieces getting knocked out. That's probably one of the most impressive numbers of the day. 15 drones being destroyed, 1 MLRS, and 1 anti-aircraft warfare system also went and bit the dust. Overall, a very good day today in terms of the frontline equipment being lost, but of course sad to see that no Bobcat skid steers or special equipment vehicles were lost because that's something we always make fun of. But still, pretty good losses overall, and hopefully we can see that the Ukrainians continue to ramp up those losses and continue to inflict maximum amounts of damage and destruction on the Russian forces, so that way the Russians will be pushed out of the country sooner rather than later. We're now going to be moving on from that casualty report and on into the front lines themselves, and as you can tell, there are nothing but videos from the Bakhmut area today. The entire area was blanketed with videos, and it was really interesting because we got a very good look at almost everything that happened of note on the battlefield today from all of those clips. But before we move into that northeastern front with the only one lone video clip near Svatove, the live chat is, I'm not even lying tonight, has been fast. Right now, at this moment, there are 73 chats coming in a minute. That means that there is more than 1 chat coming in per second on average, and that is pretty impressive. And not only that, loads of y'all have been talking about the massive losses that the Russians have taken today, and not only that, all of the other major events that have been occurring in the world, and not just the world, but especially in Ukraine today. Matthew's been looking at all of that, and he's been seeing what all of y'all have been saying, and we've been wondering, if we were to put y'all to a vote, what do y'all think on some of the leading subjects that we're seeing in the live chat tonight? And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
And we did put several questions to a vote, and the very first one says, today, Russia classified the criminal case against Igor Girkin as quote-unquote top secret. And what are your thoughts? 59% said Girkin is in deep trouble now. 19% said it's just for propaganda. 14% said he will simply be imprisoned, and 8% said unsure. And on this one, to me, I think very clearly he is in deep trouble. They are trying to brush this little situation under the rug, make it top secret so they don't have to report anything to the public, because apparently Russia plans on jacking him up pretty badly. I would not be shocked if he was something worse happened to him rather than just being in prison, to be completely honest, while I stutter my way through that. I think the Russians have something else in store for him that could be a lot worse. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say they're throwing the book at him. And it's so funny because, you know, Girkin was their, like, poster child for a good while there inside of the DPR and LPR. He's like, oh, look, he is the hero. You know, he shot down the plane. He's a great guy. And now they're going to be trying to put this guy under the prison. That's kind of the normal way that Russia works. You know, the poster childs of today become the prisoners and executed of tomorrow. So it's not anything shocking to me, but I'm sure they are actually going to go through with just putting this guy under the prison. Honestly, like Matthew said, I think they may end up even trying to assassinate the guy if that is the case as well. You know, I wouldn't doubt that at all, because the Russians technically haven't had a death penalty ever since the beginning of the Soviet Union, but we all know that that's only on paper. They have an unofficial death penalty that is exercised by the government and its whims. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, at least in my opinion. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our second poll says by 2025, Baltic states will disconnect from Russia's energy systems completely. And what are your thoughts? 76% said excellent, and that's a great decision. 18% said that should have been done ages ago. 5% said unsure, and 2% said bad. That will create many problems. And for me personally, I am with the 18%. I think that should have been done ages ago. And of course, I do know that it is quite expensive to change around infrastructure from being relying on Russia for their energy. But I think the Baltic states kind of fell behind the curve a little bit. A lot of people tried to warn Europe not to get too close to Russia when it comes to, for example, oil and also their energy, and they really did not listen. For example, the Nord Stream pipeline is one example, and also the electrical system is another example. So it looks like that has come back to bite them in the butt, and they are now making the difficult decision and very costly decision to disconnect completely. So hopefully that goes smoothly. But Enforcer, what say you?
Well, the Baltic states are a little bit different in that instance because the Baltic states were a part of the Soviet Union, so they were actually just operating off of old Soviet infrastructure. That wasn't something they went out of their way to do. It's just something that has existed since Soviet times, and so they've been using it since the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991 up until the modern day. And of course, considering the shifting political situation and diplomatic situation in the region, now they are making the decision to switch off the old Soviet power grids. Look, an old Soviet vault. And they're now planning on switching over from that and into the NATO electrical system, or the westernized electrical system that exists in the rest of Europe at this point. So I would have to say that it's a great thing to know that they're finally doing that. They have, of course, really had no problem with the energy production that they had been getting from the Soviet grid. And by the way, just, clearing this up again because I know someone's about to say, but the Soviet Union isn't around anymore, obviously. But the power grid is of Soviet origin. That entire power grid in the Baltic states that is owned and managed by those Russian companies was created under the years of the Soviet Union, I believe around the 1960s, if I'm correct. That entire area was electrified under that system. And so it's something that has just naturally been a part of since the 1960s. But it's important to get them off of it because they're no longer in the Soviet Union and they're no longer in the Russian sphere. They are out on their own sphere. They're in the Western sphere at this point, and almost their own region of NATO. Like, it's really the only region of NATO that is actually kind of divided from the rest of it, rather than Scandinavia now, where you can say that is the Baltic region of NATO. The rest of NATO is just kind of like a large clump, all the way from Poland to the United Kingdom, and then even across the Atlantic Ocean and into the United States and Canada. It's all just kind of like clumped together. That's just NATO proper. But the Baltic states are very special in their position. They are the closest thing to the second largest city in Russia, St. Petersburg, and not only that, they are in a pretty precarious position as far as the Suwalki Gap goes. And with the Suwalki Gap being closed and the possibility that the Russians could shut off their power grids for the large part or seriously cripple them just by turning off the power going to the Baltic states, it is very important for them to finally shift off of that Soviet electrical infrastructure that they have been working with and into the Western sphere. That is something that I honestly feel like NATO should have pushed them to do when they were joining NATO way back in the 2000s. That's something that I feel like they should have done at that point. Is say, hey, that's a little bit of a strategic concern, considering that the Russians largely fuel your power grid. Let's switch it over now, and we'll even subsidize it to the Western grid. I feel like that would have been something smart to have done back then, but still, there's no time like the present, and it's good to know that they are doing it right now instead. And so with that, I hope that...
I gotta say that, and not to crack on the Europeans too much, because obviously hindsight is 2020, but it seems like the European countries, especially the Baltic states, are kind of complacent. They know that they should probably change over before now. 2025 is their objective, but we're not sure if it'll be done exactly by that time. And by then, who knows what's going to happen with the war? We don't know what's going to happen. Putin could decide to lash out at Poland and start a major conflict. We don't know. So they've definitely waited until the last second. And I think that's because they're just comfortable and complacent, thinking that the West will come to their aid if something bad happens. But you couldn't give Russia a bigger bargaining chip than letting them have access to your energy infrastructure.
And I would certainly agree. And as far as other countries have gone, outside the Baltics, which were just kind of a part of the Soviet power structure, literally, the Soviet power grid structure, the Germans really did pull a risky one way back in the 2010s when they decided to start buying a large amount of Russian oil. That was, of course, due to a whole bunch of internal German issues, which I won't be talking about. But that was something that was a really risky move, and we could see that that did come to bite them in 2022 when the Russians started to cut off any oil production or natural gas being sent to Germany. We could see that that did lead to a natural rise and increase of prices of natural gas and other heating elements inside of Germany as well as Poland. But Poland was affected to a much smaller degree. That is something that was an interesting concept at the time, and to explain the concept, because there was logic behind it, the Germans and the European Union believed at the moment that if they were able to economically tie the Russians to them, they could start to sway the Russians and their interests through their purchasing power. And that clearly did not work. That was a bit of a mistake on their line of thinking, but you can't really blame them for trying, because usually purchasing someone's products makes them a lot more bendable to your will. We can see that all over the world. That's why the Saudis are such big friends with the United States, because we are a large purchaser of Saudi oil. And that's why the Saudis kind of like us, although they kind of dislike us at the same time. And that's also why we give them all kinds of cool stuff, like tanks, F-15s. I mean, hell, the Saudis really have access to about as much of a variety and as many weapons as we've given to the Israelis at this point. And that says a lot, considering that the Israelis are almost a weapons colony of the United States as far as everything we manufacture ending up making its way over there. So usually it has a pretty positive effect to purchase someone's stuff. And that's also why you'll usually see that there's a big debate in the United States. And of course, I'm not going to be talking about the positives and negatives and what I think about it, but this is why you see large debates in the United States about producing the United States' own oil or purchasing from overseas. And there are benefits and negatives to each one. The benefits of internal production of oil in the United States or other forms of heating elements like natural gas is that it gives you a strategic level of independence from other countries. So you don't really have to worry about the economic ebb and flow of oil worldwide, because the oil production is entirely centralized within the United States. And that means if for some reason there was an outbreak of war or oil supply lines were to be threatened across the globe, the United States would largely be an island of its own, able to function itself with its own oil reserves. The problem with that, however, is that you don't really get the same kind of sway on the world stage by doing that, because you're not purchasing anyone's products, so they really don't have to listen to you as much as if you suggest or say something to them. However, the benefits to purchasing foreign oil from other countries is that purchasing power you have, and the fact that their economy is largely blowing up because you're buying their oil, means that they'll listen to you a little bit more, and you kind of get a little launching base in other parts of the world. Remember, the invasion of Iraq and the Gulf War would have never been possible if we hadn't bought Saudi oil for such a long time in such large amounts. Because we had done that, we had such a large economic sway over the Saudis that they had become pretty strong allies in the region at that point, and they even allowed us to base our invasion from their own country. If it wasn't for that, we wouldn't have been able to do anything similar to it. And you can see that across the rest of the world. Purchasing power is a very important thing, but of course there is a drawback, and the exact drawback is why people argue for internal or domestic production of oils, natural gases, and heating elements, is that it's a lot more fragile. It's a lot more variable on world prices, which can lead to small economic slumps. And not only that, in the event of war, those oil supply lines could directly be threatened by foreign navies, such as the People Liberation Army Navy, which is a really weird name, or the Russian Navy, which is far less capable than the Chinese Navy is at this point. So those are kind of like the benefits and risks to internal or domestic production, and the Germans decided to go with plan B, not domestic but foreign, so that way they could try and sway the Russians a little bit more, but that just completely fell flat on its face, because it appears that the Russians didn't really care about any kind of economic fallout, or the fact that there wouldn't really be any purchasers of their natural gas or oil for the next 2 years. The Chinese and the Indians at this point are kind of picking up that slack, however, because they know, for one, the Russians are starting to move more so into the Chinese sphere, and two, it's incredibly cheap. And countries that are trying to explode their economies, they have to find some kind of fossil fuel at incredibly cheap prices, whether it be coal, diesel, gas, whatever it must be. They have to find it cheap, and that's why the Indians and the Chinese are kind of taking up the mantle of purchasing all of this natural gas and oil from the Russians, is because they need it for their own economies, and also it is a pretty cheap market to go into. But I hope that explains everything about that fairly well, with what the Germans did, and also the differences in between the Baltic states and the German situation, with why they were getting their power from the Russians and why the Germans got their natural gas from the Russians. But with that, I hope that addresses all of that fairly well, and we are now on to the next one.
All right, and our third poll says top EU diplomats believe that Russia will resume participation in the grain deal soon, and what are your thoughts? 35% said it's possible, but let's wait. 35% also said Russia will likely rejoin the deal. 11% said unsure, and 19% said Russia will not rejoin the deal. And for me, I think it's possible, but we will have to wait and see, because Russia is attacking all of the grain ports that Ukraine has because they don't want them exporting grain. However, the Russians are caught in a bit of a catch-22, because I think their Black Sea blockade turned out to be a bluff, and I think that Israeli vessel making it through to Ukrainian port proved that all for the world to see. Now, I think that's why the Russians are now trying to entertain some negotiations with Turkey and also Ukraine to restart the deal because their bluff has been called. But that's my speculation. Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say the Black Sea blockade does appear to just fall flat on its face, because if a single ship makes it through, and it's not really like this thing was trying to hide itself. I believe it had its transponder on, if I'm correct.
I believe so.
Yeah, it wasn't really trying to hide itself. If the blockade was in effect, they would have been able to intercept it and stop it, yet they didn't. And that may be showing that the Russian blockade was only in words alone, and if you actually tried to challenge that blockade, it didn't even really exist. That also may be affected due to the Ukrainians striking Black Sea logistics in the peninsula of Crimea. But nevertheless, it's something to me that makes it show that the Russians may go back into the grain deal, because now they're losing face. Because if they can't enforce their blockade, it would look much better for them to just go back into the grain deal and kind of forget the whole thing of the Israeli ship being able to make it to Odessa without anyone stopping it or destroying it like they said they would. So that would be my opinion on it as well, and I hope that does address the poll fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and we are fresh out of polls, so we're moving in to our Super Chat questions, and we do have one from last night that we were unfortunately unable to get to because our internet just unexpectedly pooped out on us out of nowhere, and it was a $150 donation, extremely generous, from Menno Walters, and thank you very much for that support. And also, I vaguely remember you supporting the channel, I believe, one other time, but thank you very much for supporting the channel in such a big way, and we do appreciate it very much. And he says, very simply, take my money. Slava Ukraine.
Well, I thank you so much for the massive amount of support, and sadly, we always have to take folks' money if they send in the Super Chat, because we have no way to actually even refund it if we wanted to, which is weird, because we actually almost have, like, no control over anything. YouTube controls, you know, the fundraiser, everything like that. But anyways, I thank you so much for the massive amount of support, because you're helping this channel to keep on running, and I'm so sorry that we weren't able to get to those last night, because you sent both of those in, and then our internet died, and what's really weird about that, everyone, is that, and of course, a lot of people are always trying to give us suggestions about how we can fix our internet. If we try to get, like, actual wire connections to our house for the internet, where we could have our computers hooked up to Ethernet, that would cost thousands of dollars, which is something we don't really have. Or, you know, people say get another internet service provider. The problem is, our internet service provider is a monopoly in the area right now, and so we don't really have any other options unless we want to dial up, and dial up is never going to be able to run a stream. So that's kind of the problem we're working with here. And our internet service provider, no matter how much they want to say they're good, they are pretty poor. They're pretty bad off, and we had a complete blackout last night for nearly 30 to 40 minutes. It just cut our stream off completely, the internet just died, and then about 30 minutes later, it finally came back on. But I once again want to apologize to you so much that we weren't able to read those off last night, because they were supposed to be read off last night, and then the stream literally just died on itself due to the internet going out. So very sorry about that, but I do thank you so much once again for the massive amount of support. I hope you're here tonight hearing this, and thank you so much once again for enjoying this channel enough to help us to keep this thing running. And so I hope we addressed that fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next we have also another very generous super chat. This one is from Rob Eisman, and he puts in a massive $200 donation. And what, dang, thank you very much, Rob, for the support. He says, hello to the best. Always thanking my fellow brothers and sisters here in the LSA, AFMC, and LSN for all the support in so many areas. Also, a big thanks to my fellow vets, and I would ask everyone to say a special prayer for our stealthy and silent submariners, mission critical, and run silent, run deep.
And thank you so much for the massive amount of support, Rob, and helping this channel to keep on running. That is truly unbelievable and amazing. And I got to thank you so much for that support. And I've got to thank you so much for giving a huge shout out to the Lee Spring Army, the Air Force, the Marine Corps, and the Lee Spring Navy, because we have members of every single one of those. We don't have a Lee Spring Coast Guard, though. I was just thinking about that. But we have all the other 4 ones. We don't have a Lee Spring Space Force either. We might have to start working on that. But anyways, I gotta thank you so much for giving a shout out to them, because there are so many members of the Lee Spring Army, Air Force, Marine Corps, and Navies that are amazing folks and absolutely incredible. A lot of them are, of course, here tonight. They are some of the most dedicated soldiers of the Lee Spring Army who are always with us and always watching this news and helping to support Ukraine as well. And I got to thank you so much, Rob, for wishing them the best and also giving them big thanks, because they are incredible folks and deserve it for sure. And also, I would say, I hope that everyone does give a little special prayer for the stealthy submariners, because there are a lot of them out there, and being a submariner is mentally tough, especially for those folks out there who are under the seas for months on end without seeing the light of day until they eventually resurface. So with that, thank you so much once again for the mass amount of support, Rob, and helping this channel to keep on running. You run silent, you run deep, and I hope that everyone else in the Lee Spring Navy runs silent and runs deep. Unless you're on one of the cruisers, well, you know, just run loud and make a whole bunch of noise and raise hell or something. I don't know, but anyways, thank you so much once again, Rob. I hope that does address that fairly well, and thank you for being our very own submariner. You are certainly the submariner of the Lee Spring Navy. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the final question of this segment, and then we're going to be moving on into the Northeastern Front.
All right, and our last super chat of the segment goes to none other than Colleen Emsley, longtime channel viewer, and she put in a $50 donation. And thank you very much, Colleen, for that very generous support. And she says, thank you both for your continued coverage, and I enjoy your streams and appreciate you. Keep up the good work, and hope you enjoy law school, and Slava Ukraine, LSA. And thank you very much, and hopefully we do.
And hopefully we do. And I got to thank you so much once again for the incredibly kind words and well wishes, Colleen. Of course, like Rob is the submariner of the Lee Spring Army, Colleen is the helicopter pilot of the Lee Spring Air Force. Well, actually, I believe that would fall to the Army. But I do have to thank you so much once again for the thanks for the continued coverage. For some reason, I don't know where people were getting this memo, but people were being told we weren't going to be running this week at all. And so it actually came as a huge shock to almost everyone yesterday when we were running streams then. And I don't know if it's a big shock to everyone tonight too, but we will be running our normal 6-day schedule this week. And we will certainly be seeing about doing it next week as well. We're hoping that we'll be able to shoot for 6 days next week, but that is kind of the formal beginning of school. So we are going to be kind of like feeling that out and seeing how possible that will be. And then after that, the first real week of school begins, and then we kind of have to figure out how in the world we're even going to work this out and what we can and can't do while that's going on. And it's going to be pretty insane. But I want to also make sure to let you all know nothing is set in stone at this moment. So never think that we're going off air for now. Although we made it sound like that a couple of weeks ago, because we really don't even know right now. It's completely unknown. We could show up to the first week of school and it's incredibly easy, and we could just start to run these normally like we did through normal college when we were getting our bachelor's degrees, or they may be incredibly difficult. We just don't even really know at the moment. But I hope that we do have a good time with law school. Of course, we have high hopes, and we are hoping to make it through law school with flying colors, maybe even be top of the class. Somehow I think we actually both ended up being top of the class in UAB, if I'm correct. So hopefully,
yeah, I was somewhere up there at the top of the class, but I never got a ranking, I don't think. But I got the honors thing. I forgot what was that guy always saying that called it out?
Magna cum laude.
Yeah, that's it. That's what I got.
we both ended up being magna cum laude, so we were like, hey, that's pretty cool. But anyways, thank you so much once again for appreciating the channel, appreciating us, and encouraging us to keep up the good work, Colleen. And thank you so much for being our Lee Spring Army helicopter pilot from Canada. And of course, Slava Ukraini, and long live the Lee Spring Army. And thank you so much once again for being an old guard of this channel. And now, with that in mind, it is now time for us to move on into the Northeastern Front and to begin to cover the next 24 hours of news in this area. And moving on into our frontline analysis, things have of course been juicy in this part of the front lines. Check it out. Check it out, like Bald and Bankrupt will say. But As you can see, no frontline advances to speak of over nearly 100 miles of continuous front line. Pretty cool. But you know what's even cooler is this video of a peon being slammed by a HIMARS rocket. Now that's really cool.
Boom, 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 boom.
And we're going to be
Oh,
muting
boom,
that.
boom, 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 boom.
Dude, that's what you sound like after you eat Taco Bell. Boom, 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 boom. But we can see the peon right there. We can see the HIMARS exploding right nearby. And then it appears that the very outer ring of the shrapnel hit the peon and knocked it out. Pretty nice, I gotta say, and love to see it, of course. It's always the best thing to see. We're now going to be moving on from the only clip that we got in the northeastern area, and we're now going to be moving on down to the area of Verkno-Kamyanka and Seversk, where we saw that a K2 unit was hitting some Russians with some drones in this area. Check it out.
Сейчас заходим на него. Да, снижай.
We're going to have to mute this, but we can see that they are targeting an enemy tank, of course, as the subtitles say. As this drone begins flying in, we can see that they have the piano wire held out in front of the drone, so that way they can wrap it around an unsuspecting Russian's neck and, you know, give him a little bit of a fun time. But we can now see the drone coming on down towards the tank. And someone just said, take it from a retired judge, law school is not easy, and you're scared.
Well, tell us what part is not easy, because that's what I need the details here.
Y'all are scaring me. Please don't. But we can see the drone flying into the back of the engine bay and exploding directly onto it. And we can see that again. And we can now see a drone flying near a silo farm. But we can't really see... Oh, actually, we see an MTLB down there with a small turret attached. Wait a minute. This is not just any silo farm. This is Verkno-Kamyanka itself. And really quickly, let me go down there and let me try and show this to y'all. So here's the silo farm that we're looking at right here. Here's the refinery at Verkno-Kamyanka, and the area that little vehicle is at, it's like right there, I believe. I would be great at GeoGuessr, everyone, I think. Not to be like a narcissist or anything about that, but I have a pretty good knack of being able to find these places. So let's see here. No, actually, the little vehicle is about right there, actually, because you can see that little brown shed right over there, and you can see the vehicle. Oh, wait a minute, hang on. We need to locate again. Right there. That's exactly where the vehicle is. And I'll have y'all know this, is that at this point in the war, I don't even really check where the brigades are anymore. I just kind of put the markers where I think they are. And somehow I'm able to get it right almost every time at this point. That tells y'all how bizarrely accurate everything in my head's getting, because I don't even really know where the brigades are at anymore. But if I see a video, somehow I'm able to put it down in a fairly accurate location. Because I gotta be honest with y'all, I don't even really know at this. I didn't really even know when I put down that marker at this point. Just being completely honest with y'all and being completely unfiltered, I didn't even know the 54th Brigade was near Verkno-Kamyanka anymore. I just knew that earlier on in the war, when I made sure to check, they were always around Verkno-Kamyanka, so I just put the marker here, and lo and behold, it is literally right where the marker is, right over here. That's how far the marker is, maybe less than a mile away. So I gotta say, that actually was pretty nuts that I got that right, and I just had to share that with y'all because I was like, oh my god, that was exactly where the marker was supposed to be, and I didn't even get this far into the video to find out. But we can see the MTLB down there. And we can now see the drone flying on in. And it's coming right down on the MTLB, passing under the pipeworks, and getting right on top of the MTLB and then exploding. And we see that explosion right there. But I can't really tell how much damage was caused. We can now see another drone flying in to hit some kind of a camouflaged anti-air gun, I believe. It looked like an S-60 or an S-50, perhaps. We can see it coming down right on top of the gun and destroying it. And now we can see that out in the fields in the Seversk area, we can now see a drone flying in towards the Verkno-Kamyanka refinery and getting ready to destroy the next system there. But it appears that this one's running into some pretty heavy static before it even got close to the ground. We can now see this one hitting some kind of a BRDM-looking vehicle. And that one also hitting a lot of... I couldn't really tell what that is, to be quite honest with y'all. But we can now see another drone flying in. This is probably like the 5th or 6th one in the video, so they are just hammering the Russians in this area with the drone forces. And we can now see one of the drones, I think, just do a stanky leg. Check this out. Okay, so we're waiting for the drone. It should show up here in a minute. And I think that's the drone, that little pixel right there. And we're about to see it do like the drone equivalent of the stanky leg as it does like a loop in air over this area. And here it goes. I don't even know what the hell that was doing. But we now see that one going in on the Lada and exploding right near it. And we can now, wait a minute, enemy armored vehicle has been detected. That appears to be a BTR-60. Pretty primitive APC as it comes. It only has a 7.62 millimeter gun inside of its turret, and it's a BTR. You know, that is what it is. But we can now see a drone flying into the area, getting ready to slam right into that BTR-60. It's got to make it past a building and some pipeworks, but nonetheless, the Ukrainian pilots were able to do these and slammed it right into the side of the BTR. We can now see the World War II equivalent of a Studebaker truck on the side of the road. That's got to be the oldest truck I've ever seen in Russian Army service, but it will also be destroyed as well. Relics don't even get a pass in this war. And everyone is saying that law school is going to be tough, and they're all scaring me. Stop, y'all, it's scaring me.
It can't be that hard. How many people graduate law school yearly?
How many? You know what, Matthew? Can you get an answer for us on that?
Pull it up. Pull it up, Jenky.
Jamie, pull up the video.
Let's see. How many people graduate law school annually?
And there goes the Relic. It just slammed right into the engine bay of the Relic, so it's gone.
No, 35,000 people pass law school annually.
Dang!
Can you believe that many people have the opportunity to be a lawyer?
Now, how many?
I don't know how many go on to pass the bar.
Now, how many people graduate with bachelor's degrees every year in the United States? That way, you can kind of get a little bit of a scale there.
It feels like it, pretty much everybody now.
Yeah, you know, it feels like everyone's got a bachelor's degree. I have one in history, meaning that beyond the stream, I wouldn't be able to get a job. But we can now see this drone.
4.09 million.
Oh, well, that actually makes it seem like very few people go or graduate from law school. You know, 4 million.
It's actually not that many.
Yeah, that's not a lot, actually. That's starting to worry me a lot now. But anyways, getting on from the worrying and the anxiety that's now been induced by the audience, thank you. We can now see a Euro 4320 that's got itself netted up. And we can see the next drone coming in to take its pick. And we now see the drone slamming into the front cab of the Ural right there, and a large puff of black smoke coming out. And we can see the drone now surveying the entire oil refinery. And this drone really is just taking a whole view of the land, really. It's not even going for anything at the moment. It's just getting a good look. And we can see the Euro 4320 down there again. I can't tell if it's already been hit this time, because it was hit previously, or hurt previously, either one. And now we can see the drone coming in on final approach, and they're about to lean it forward like that, right into the Ural, and hopefully we'll see that the Ural has been destroyed. And oh, a nice puff of smoke. And...
Woof.
Oh, that was a good one. That one went right under the bottom of the truck and blew up under it. Look at that. That was impressive. Man, the Russians are going to hop back in the truck and go, hey, the engine's knacking a little bit. And then the engine just explodes. But anyways, that's the end of the clip, and a huge credit to the K2, which has decimated Russian forces in the Verkno-Kamyanka refinery area. Moving on from that clip, which, you know, that was just weird to get the marker right, so we're going to move that right where it was, which was right there. Now, you know, I'm actually blown away by that because I was guessing at that earlier, and I got it right. But moving on into the Bakhmut area and into the northern front, we've been seeing some action here today, but over the past 24 hours, and let me make sure that we go over the past 24 hours, it appears that there haven't been any frontline advances in Bakhmut at all, according to Deep State UA. However, while that's the case for Deep State, we have seen a lot of video footage, probably the most video footage that we've seen coming out of the Bakhmut area today. And starting near Vasyakivka, we saw that the Ukrainian helicopter was firing off its rockets in support of Ukrainian ground forces in the field. Hopefully there's no music. All right. One MI8. But anyway, so you see the MI8 taking off. It's only got 2 rocket pods. And there it goes, like some kind of a large floating guppy. And we can now see it flying across the field with a wingman. Well, actually, we're watching from the wingman's camera. And you see them almost just feet above the ground. They're now firing off their rockets, flying over some tree lines. Man, that kind of flying must be nerve-wracking, you know, because one mistake and this thing starts to eat dirt. And we now see it flying over the fields. Very picturesque. You can see them flying over even more fields and more fields. Flying over the water. It's really beautiful. You see them flying over some fields, firing off their rockets. Those are S-8Ks, by the way. We can now see them turning a hard left and popping their flares, a bunch of them landing in the fields below, starting many wonderful forest fires. With that, that's the end of the clip, but great to see that the MI8s are, of course, still providing support for the infantry. Moving on from that area and further on down the line, we also got an interesting interview with a soldier from the 77th. And I'm going to tell you all this, these next 2 clips appear to be showing videos from a long time ago that were just found today, and so we're showing them tonight. And also a interview of a recount from a soldier from the 77th Brigade of something that apparently happened a while ago. But nonetheless, these are brand new from today. This is the first time we've ever seen them, so we put them onto tonight's news. There were 5 men plus Zhuzha. We had 5 MREs for a 3-day shift to hold the post. Turns out, we couldn't get a provision supply because of the really dense fire. So it happened that 5 men, plus Zhuzha, shared 1 MRE a day. It was obvious she was hungry. We started opening our MREs, giving her gellets, opening a can. We shared, but we didn't realize it would last for 9 days instead of 3. With time, our food started to get scarce. At that point, we shared 1 gullet for 3 people. Zhuzha would still get her share, sometimes only some crumbs. On our MREs, we lasted 4 days. At that point, she started uncovering and digging out and bringing her own MREs. So just to keep everyone up to speed here, Zhuzha is the dog that we're seeing in this video, the one that looks like it's just vibing. And apparently, once they started to run out of MREs, the dog went and used its little sniffer to sniff out MREs that had been hidden under some dirt, dig them up, you know, and of course completely unused MREs, and then bring them back to the outpost for all of the soldiers to eat and share with Zhuzha, which is the dog. So that is really cute. And also, that dog was a lifesaver for these guys, because the MREs that were supposed to last them 3 days lasted them the 3 days, and then they stayed in that outpost for another 9 days because they were pinned down in that area. Since she couldn't break packages, she would bring and put them in front of us to open. About 4 MREs in 4 to 5 days, she sure brought over. But as for a stick of salami, she brought it over to the courtyard and didn't share it with anyone. She ate it all alone. When we were leaving the post on the 9th day, Zhuzha left with us. The retreat was also quite hard. We had to walk for 8 kilometers to the evacuation point. Our fellow soldier stood there. She didn't go with them. She went with us, with Lashtocha. Hammer arrived, and we all 10 men rushed inside. Those other fellow soldiers were coming back from another post. Meanwhile, Lashtocha, the mortar fire started. I see him running to the woods to find her, the dog. She got scared of explosions. He went to the woods and carried her out. At that moment, the fire started getting closer, but he didn't leave her, but we took her with us. And that's the end of that clip right there. But I gotta say, that dog deserves a medal for what it did, because it made sure that those soldiers would not survive holding that post for 9 days straight without any additional food or resupply from forces in the rear. And that's actually an incredible story. And once again, to show y'all the pupper, here's the doggo here. That's Zhuzha the dog. And that dog was able to find these guys food for 6 straight days. Very cute dog.
That's crazy.
Man, that'd be crazy though, for real. And that's also a really cute looking little dog. I love that dog. That's a cute one. That one deserves a lot of
Man,
pet.
that dog's full of exuberant joy.
Dude, that dog looks like it is the happiest one on earth. That dog actually looks like Shiba.
It does.
Yeah, it's got the same smile like Shiba. But anyways, with that, we're going to be moving on from that little clip and on to our next one. And this is also apparently archival footage, I believe, from the 77th Airborne Brigade again. Actually, this is the 93rd, showing some of the action going on in Bakhmut in 2023, although the date is unknown. It does say it's archival, so we're assuming it's earlier this year. And when you see them looking outside, as the city is getting hammered with some kind of fire, RPG fire maybe. And we hear another explosion emanating from that part of the block. As the cameraman silently films. You see another explosion hitting that building. I'm not really sure if that's a tank hitting the building or if the Russians are firing RPGs at it, but whatever it is, that building is getting slammed. And that explosion apparently shook the cameraman a little bit, and now he's getting a little bit further down the stairwell. Nevertheless, a little bit of extra footage from the Bakhmut battle that apparently was archived for a while and just made it out today. Moving on from that and down into the area where the real action is happening in Bakhmut, Klishchiivka has been alive today. We haven't seen this much activity in the Klishchiivka area in a pretty decent while, but it was spread across the entirety of the front line and was interesting from start to finish. Starting off with our first bit, we saw some fighting occurring around the Klishchiivka area. We hear the Ukrainian on the radio as they continue to advance in the area. We hear a firefight occurring down the length of this berm. And it looks like they're clearing out a little outpost here. You know, it's just kind of normal stuff.
Чё? На всякий случай. А я тебе не зацеплю.
And we now hear the firefight continuing as they continue to fire at Russian forces.
Стоп! Ще одна! За ним. Прикрить.
We now see them regrouping here as they continue to try and push down the length of the berm.
Все, бачу.
And with that, that's the end of the clip. But really interesting to see and great to know that the 3rd Brigade is continuing on the push down the area. With that, we're now moving on into Klishchiivka itself, where we saw that the 3rd Brigade had been taking the time to collect some trophies. Take a look at these trophies. I mean, I don't know why I'm butchering trophies.
I don't know either. I'm having a hard time speaking tonight.
But you can see that one of them got a Death Wish coffee or something like that. We see them all taking a sip. We see this guy now taking a sip as well. The light is blinding him. We now see this guy messing with his little machine gun. We now see them advancing. Very quietly. We now see them making it to the outpost. And we can see them whispering to each other because they're trying to be quiet. We see them looking around. And we now see them at the bottom of a tree. It appears that they've gotten themselves a Chechen badge. Look at that. Done.
Oh, look, a Chechen badge.
Oh, look.
Soviet badge.
An old Chechen badge. Wow, would you look at that? We now see him looking through a Russian newspaper that made its way to the front line. And spitting on it.
Spitting on it for good measure.
It's now starting to sprinkle a little. And it looks like they're looking around in the brush below them. And trying to defuse an explosive, actually. We now see them looking into a dugout. And it appears there's just there's a Ukrainian down there. Actually, a couple of Ukrainians down there.
А так би ні кулі, ні мене. Диви, міна лежить на. А то ти заходіся, вон, братан. А вон ще одна, диви, вон ще. Єбать. Тоді виходимо отсюда.
You see them still looking around in the brush. Just having a little bit of a conversation here. And now moving on. Oh, and now they're getting shelled. It appears that a little round was called, and that might be the ranging shot.
Падай.
You now hear another explosion coming in nearby.
Хитрий, нормально все? Пацики, тут можуть мінки бути. Осторожненько.
And now they're moving out of the tree line and into an open field.
Ти нахуй.
the guy lifted up a sleeping bag and under it was a PKP machine gun. So he's like, "Hey, look!" He acted like he just won the lottery right there.
А що це таке?
But that thing looks like it's kind of in bad shape, not gonna lie.
Іди-ка ти сюди, родной.
But he's now getting himself the little souvenir.
5 пек, нахуй, ебать його в рот. Типа ми лучше.
Good
Oh,
God.
wow.
Okay, that scared the hell out of me. I thought they just got hit. But anyways, we're gonna mute that now. We're gonna let the last 20 seconds or so play out. We now see them resting on a small dirt path along a tree line and throwing each other snacks. And with that, that's the end of the clip after my ears just got blasted out by the loud music. But we're now going to be moving on from Klishkivka and a little bit further south where we saw some Ukrainian troops having to hand transport equipment through the fields. Here's a clip of it. The enjoyment of transporting equipment on a stretcher is completely unbelievable. Also, you might notice, that's an AK-12. Pretty neat.
Oh.
Pretty neat. AK-12s are highly sought after by Ukrainian troops as a symbol of dominating the Russians because the only way that a Ukrainian can get their hands on an AK-12 is to capture it off of a Russian or to kill a Russian and then take it off of the dead Russian. AK-12s are also highly sought after in the United States. Believe it or not, some were able to make it over before there was an imports ban on Russian arms back in the early 2010s. Only a few hundred of them were able to make it over, and so if you ever find an AK-12 or an AK-12 kit in the United States, they are incredibly rare. A semi-automatic AK-12 right now can fetch anywhere around 15,000 US dollars. Very expensive. We can see that on this stretcher here, it appears that they have some ammo crates, most likely mortar rounds, I would assume. Also, some people are asking, what is so special about an AK-12? Well, there was actually supposed to be a lot special about AK-12s, but due to budgetary concerns, which are always a massive problem plaguing the Russian army, it largely turned into a modified AK-74 for all intents and purposes. Some of the modifications were for the muzzle brake that was added to the AK-12, which allows for suppressors and other kinds of modifications to easily be attached and detached. Also, the rail, the Picatinny rail, is mounted directly onto the dust cover on top of the rifle itself, which is a massive advantage because it doesn't allow for the rattling and the eventual sight picture being lost after continuous firing. That's another advantage. It also has a extendable stock, and some of them also have collapsible stocks as well, which allows for a little bit more customizability for the shooter. Overall, beyond these few cosmetic and ergonomic improvements, underneath the shell of the AK-12 is largely an AK-74. It fires the exact same cartridge, a 5.45x39, and beyond that, there were really no major improvements to the operating system of the AK. And with that, that's the end of the clip, but really neat to see them transporting those supplies and also the little AK-12. We're now going to be moving on from that and into the area of Kadima, as we saw that the 3rd Brigade was doing some counter battery actions in the area, and they appear to be incredibly successful. There is a D-20 artillery piece, a 152mm gun, and it's about to turn into 152mm of scrap. Check it out. Look at that. The shell hits right on top of the D-20, and it is gone in a flash.
There's that Horton flying wing in the top right corner again.
Was it really the Nazis that made a UFO? But we could see the artillery continuing to slam into the artillery pieces and continue to destroy them quite effectively, as a matter of fact. And with that, that's the end of those clips, but great to see that the 3rd Brigade was able to destroy some Russian artillery in the area. Moving on into our final clip around Bakhmut, in the area of Ozryniivka, we saw that the Atom unit was also hitting some Russian tanks today. Alright, that sounds like
that's
hold.
a bop.
That sounds like hold music, but with a lot of static. We can now see the drone flying over the tank that is trying to retreat from the field, but it will be thwarted in its attempted retreat, as this drone is going to come down and give it a critical blow. We now see it spiraling on down towards the tank. We can see that the static overtook it fairly quickly, so we don't know how accurate that was, but somehow it landed right on top of the tank. We now see the tank smoking, which is not a good sign, and we now see black smoke coming out of the engine bay. All not good things. And now we can see what appears to be a second hit on the tank, and I would assume that that is knocked out for sure. With the black smoke and white smoke billowing out of the vehicle, there is certainly some kind of a fire brewing inside of it, and that means that the tank will brew on up and destroy itself, which is great to see. We're now going to be moving on from the Bakhmut area, where that tank was destroyed, and further on down towards Orliivka, where we saw that a Russian tank was captured today. Fairly nice to see. And take a look at that. It's a T-72B3, abandoned by the Russian crew, but not destroyed. And so it will be usable by the Ukrainians at a later time. And everyone's saying 3. I don't know what the 3s are for.
Psyops put in a question for the chat. He said, who's the best in the Enforcer team? Press 1 for Matt, 2 for Andrew, 3 for Mr. Corgi. So what we're going to do, since Mr. Corgi's the top winner, is he's going to run the show tomorrow.
Oh.
We're going to bring in Mr. Corgi and have him tapping and rapping on the keyboard, responding to everybody.
Man, all you're going to hear is, and then eventually you'll hear, as he yawns, and then it'll be like, all right, time to take him off air, he's sleepy. And Mr. Corgi will be like, help me, man, I'm tired. But anyways, with that, very nice to hear that everyone's favorite Enforcer team member is Mr. Corgi. We will now be summarily executing Mr. Corgi for taking the limelight from our dictatorship. I'm just kidding. But anyways...
Yes, he shall not take the limelight.
He shall not take the limelight, please. But anyways...
We're gonna make his criminal case top secret, if you know what I mean.
We're going to be going up to Mr. Corgi. We're going to be poking him tomorrow. And he's going to get angry. He's going to nip at our fingers. But anyways, moving on from that and on into the Donetsk area, we also saw some explosions occurring in the Kievsky district around this area. Speaking of which, there haven't been any frontline advances or retreats in the Donetsk area today. But here's an explosion in the Kievsky district. Check it out. Oh. Oh, bleh! That's it. There goes a car alarm. Well, you see the smoke coming up from the explosion right there. And you know, man, I think that would be cool. Maybe put some pictures of Mr. Corgi out there. Maybe make a community post for him. So that way people can always go and look at the Monsu will work.
I'm going to put him at my desk, like at the keyboard, wearing the LSA hat, and take a picture.
You know,
that'll be torture for him, but,
dude,
but
he
he'll
will
have to
not
deal
want
with
to
it.
wear that hat. He'll be like, get that thing off me. You know, you'll be like getting violent and stuff. But anyways, moving on from Donetsk, and the only video we got from there, we are now moving on into the southern front. To make sure that there are no frontline advances in this area, we'll be going over the past 24 hours. The Russians
right there.
are getting pushed back at Volodar. That's not good for the Russians. So let's see what we've got there for video clips. Nothing, actually. We didn't get any video clips from that area today, but we did see the Ukrainians firing an SPG-9 at the Russians in the local area. I don't know why, but that one sounded like a rocket going to space instead of a normal SPG-9. What the hell was up with that? Dude, call this thing Falcon 9, because that is not the sound an SPG-9 makes.
Dad, like something went wrong with that.
I guess that must be the microphone, because that does not sound normal. continuing to fire.
Ще одна. Давай.
I gotta be honest with y'all, I don't really know how I feel about this SPG-9
Знімаємось.
because it just doesn't sound right, but we can now see them packing up and moving it on out of the area, but great to see that they're using their recoilless rifles, hopefully effectively. Moving on into the area of Starmayorsk, we also got to see a day in the life of the 5th Brigade. Check it out. Робота экипажи танки эти.
Т-80, малышка.
Т-80 БВ. Ну, я лично хотів його підписати фокус, ну тут уже як екіпаж вирішили, ні,
Малишка.
малишка. Де віджали, ми вам не скажемо.
Танк это
Там більше
БФ
немає.
Маленька.
Там ще є.
Donetsk область України. We now see the tank loading with some epic music accompanying it. And now firing.
По позивному я Форд, командир танка, навідник, чорний. І
This
механік.
man's name is, well, his call sign is literally Ford. Like the Ford car.
Built tough, Ford.
Have you ever wanted to get yourself a tank commander that you know will run for about a week before the coolant hose comes loose and you have to bring the truck to the shop? Well, then you ought to get yourself a tank commander or a commandeer tanky named Ford. Ford will get your tank through the job. He'll make sure to get everything done just right. And if you ever wanted a lot of pulling power, well, you've come to the right place, because while Ford has the pulling power, I've honestly got to say it has a little bit of a shaky track record, but nevertheless, guts, glory, Ford. This guy's call sign is Chorny, and then this guy's call sign is Herabesi. I think I'm getting that one completely wrong.
Жеребець.
На Донбасі вже півгода. Ну, іменно на виїзди буквально скільки? Місяць назад перший раз виїжджав.
Я недавно, я 2 місяці, я з другої частини перевівся.
Перший раз, як виїжджали, я лично переживав, ну, як
Someone said death wobble. Hey, bingo!
Такого таке злагодження, що кожен друг друга розуміє з полуслова. Нам навіть іноді переговорюватися з чорним не треба. Ми ж друг друга бачимо. Я на нього дивлюсь, він там раз поняв, або там рукою махнув якось. Ну, чотенько друг друга розуміємо.
You see them continuing to talk about the tank, and we can now see them operating the tank once more. And firing. Man, keep your hand clear of that breach.
Man, I'm telling you, that'll rip it right off.
Oh, man, I'm telling you.
Задача от орієнтира від одної точки до другої точки, отработати. Там крепко зайнята позиція.
We now see them continuing to talk about the tank.
От чітко поставлена задача, один участок рознести в хлам.
But overall, sadly, I have to say this, we don't have translations for what these folks are saying, and it appears that the entire video is clipping in between their interview and them operating and firing the tank. So, very nice to see the 5th Brigade in action, but we're going to be moving on from this clip. If y'all would like to see the entirety of it, just click on the link in the description below for the Day 525 map, go to this exact part of the map around the Starmayorsk area, click on that link, and then you can watch the video at your own pace and speed. Hell, you could do that for the entire map. You may just choose not to watch the stream at all, just click on our maps. I would kind of be sad, but you could. And so with that, we're now moving on into the area of Starmanivka, where we saw that the Ukrainian FPV drone was able to destroy a Russian MTLB. With some rock music. We are destroying Russians with the power of rock. But we can see the MTLB right there just sticking out of the tree line going, oh, hello. And we're about to see it get blown up. And here comes the drone spotting the MTLB.
Man, you got to do it in the United 24 like narration voice. If you can try to mimic that.
Let's see. The drone is coming into the area. The drone then does a precise strike. Or something like that. I don't really know.
The drone hits the tank like the Russian vessels.
It sinks like the Moskva. Or something like that. But
Their audio is so crispy at United 24. I have no idea how they do it. And also their narration's pretty good too.
So why in the world does Russians poke their tanks out of the trees? That is an amazing question, and one that we may have the answer to. You know, or something like that. I can't really do it too well. I'm trying to remember it, but for some reason it's like eluding me. It's like the Mandela effect. It's like I've never even heard that before. But anyways, moving on from that area, great to see that they got an MTLB. And moving on down towards Wheelapole, we also saw some Ukrainian rocket artillery support. Check it out. Also, let me unmute this.
За неньку Україну!
Ah, the sound of freedom.
Perhaps. I have to say that is the weirdest looking truck, though, the truck cab that I've ever seen for an MLRS. But still, great to see that they're laying down some pretty effective fire. Moving on from that clip and on into the next one, towards the area of Robolny, we saw that near Novokarlivka that the Ukrainians were able to destroy a Russian tank today. Credit to the 53rd Brigade. Pac-Man music ensues. Action follows. Check it out. And here goes the grenade. Right into the open hatch. Blowing up the tank. Sending the ammo sky high. $3.5 million lost within seconds. Was there?
It was a very low one, I think.
Nope, turret's still there. No, it's just a massive...
Are you sure?
Yeah, the turret...
Go back. I could have sworn I saw something go tossing.
Well, let's see. No, those are parts, but that's not the turret.
False alarm.
False alarm, because there's a turret right there, by the way. It's still on the tank.
Damn.
Damn, son. But still, it's a nice roaring flame. I wouldn't cook with it. It's toxic, but, you know, still a nice flame. Man, this tank is getting flamed harder than that Russian diplomat did when he tried to steal that flag in Turkey. That guy got not just flamed, he got schwacked. But anyways, with that, that's the end of the clip, and great to see they were able to knock out another Russian tank. Moving on from that and into our next clip near Robolny, we also saw some Ukrainian troops loading up into a Bradley. And we all love Bradleys. And we got that techno hip-hop music, and we can now see the rear hatch closing to the Bradley. And look at that, they're safe and sound inside, and before long, the Bradley will begin to roll on. And there it goes, on its way.
But what about the cameraman, though? He's just gonna be left.
Dude, the cameraman never dies, man. He can be anywhere. He'll never die. But with that, that's the end of the clip right there. And really need to see that Bradley loading up and leaving the cameraman behind. As Matthew was very observant to note, the cameraman is not going with them. But moving on into our last little bit in the southern front near Lhove, or more so near Myrne, we saw that the 38th Brigade was hitting some Russian positions in this area. All right.
Man, they love that Ford corporate music in these videos.
Have you ever tried to strike a Russian vehicle with some artillery? Well, you ought to have the right kind of music. Introducing...
We are really slow. We're slowly turning the Ukrainians into American people. Like, they love Ford trucks now, and they're playing Ford, like, commercial music.
Dude, you're about to one day go over to Ukraine, and you're going to hear one of them speaking Ukrainian. You're going to be like, Tunova Kalina. And then they're going to say, man, I love a hot dog. And then they'll just go back to speaking in Ukrainian or something. You're going to be like, what? That's an American.
They start speaking in those American, like, radio tag, like, phrases. Walk with your boys. Trapaholics.
Dude, you're just
we make it look easy.
You're just sitting there in line at a gas station, you know, trying to check out, and everyone's talking and stuff in Ukrainian, and then one of them turns around and says, you're listening to 109.5 WFM, and then he just turns back around, and you're like, what the hell? But anyways, with that, that's the end of the clip right there. Great to see the 38th was able to knock out some Russian forces, and with that, it is now time for us to shift our way on up to Kyiv. And it's now time for us to hear the speech for President Volodymyr Zelensky on the 525th day of the war. And oh, buddy, he's got this thing chock-a full. It's a 6-minute long speech. And so, it's now time for the halftime show.
Бажаю здоров'я, шановні українці і українки. Це був довгий і дуже насичений день. Ранок, звіти від наших воїнів від ППО щодо збиття шахедів, 37 шахедів загалом було за цю одну ніч. Частину вдалося збити, але частину. На щастя, люди не постраждали. Є влучання у південних районах Одещини, наші порти. Робимо максимум із партнерами, щоб збільшити постачання систем протиповітряної оборони. Дуже важливо, щоб світ не звикав до цього російського терору. Кожне влучання – це спільна проблема. І не лише України, але й усіх тих у світі, чию стабільність Росія намагається знищити, коли б'є по наших портах, по нашій інфраструктурі. Зараз для російської держави це битва не лише проти нашої свободи і не лише проти нашої держави. Москва веде битву за глобальну катастрофу. Цим божевільним потрібно, щоб продовольчий ринок світу розвалився. Ці нові кризи їм потрібні збої в постачанні. Хтось там у них думає, що зможе на цьому заробити. Хтось там в Москві сподівається, що нібито щось собі виторгує. Це дуже-дуже небезпечні сподівання. Зокрема, і про продовольчу безпеку говорили сьогодні з нашими послами, провів позачергову велику нараду з усіма керівниками та керівницями українських дипломатичних установ, зібралася в Закарпатті напередодні нового політичного сезону в країнах-партнерах. Вже 16 місяців повномасштабної війни, і ми всі разом. Вся дипломатична команда України, усі, хто працює в галузі нашої зовнішньої політики, ми змогли зробити так, що світ бачить події цілком правдиво, так, як вони відбуваються, а не так, як події хоче змалювати російська пропаганда. Більшість країн світу за Україну. Ми досягли надзвичайно вагомих результатів в постачанні зброї для наших воїнів. Є потужні санкції проти Росії за терор. Зараз є й нові завдання для українських дипломатів залучати оборонні виробництва в Україну, техніки, гармат, снарядів, розширювати тренінгові місії для наших воїнів, забезпечити постачання F-16, далекобійні ракети для України. І завжди, абсолютно завжди, політичні рішення на користь нашої держави, нашої свободи. Попереду Кримська платформа, Генеральна асамблея ООН, саміт перших леді та джентльменів, глобальний продовольчий саміт, дуже важливий саміт формули миру, на який ми залучаємо світову більшість, відкриття переговорів з Європейським Союзом про вступ. Це завдання саме цього року. Підготовка більшого у відносинах з НАТО. Теж завдання, яке вже нашим дипломатам треба виконувати. Сьогодні про все це і дуже детально ми говорили. Українська дипломатія має дуже чіткий, вагомий доробок в усіх сферах. Не забуваємо і про сферу національної пам'яті нашої історії. Цьогоріч 90-ті роковини Голодомору, і ми постійно активні в комунікації з партнерами заради визнання історичної правди, заради визнання Голодомору геноцидом українського народу. Вже 28 держав визнали Голодомор геноцидом, і це на державному рівні. Ще в 4 державах є рішення однієї з палат національних парламентів. І лише протягом повномасштабної війни ухвалено 17 таких рішень щодо визнання. І дуже високий темп. І всім українським дипломатам варто зберігати саме такий темп. Бути саме такими активними в інтересах України. Щодня, щотижня, щомісяця доводити конкретними результатами для України, що наша дипломатія може і буде глобальним лідером. Провів нараду щодо безпекової та соціальної ситуації в Закарпатті, питання кордону стратегічні для регіону, доповідав генерал Дейнеко, керівник Державної прикордонної служби, ґрунтовна доповідь очільника обласної адміністрації Микити. Відчувається, що в регіоні є потрібні результати. Молодці. Релокація бізнесу та створення нових робочих місць в різних громадах області. І це важливий напрямок роботи. Потужності для реабілітації наших воїнів, правильні проекти, багато ініціатив щодо розвитку економіки Закарпаття, тих можливостей, які десятиліттями не використовувалися. Зокрема, тут в регіоні вже почалась розробка родовище солі, яке може забезпечити всю Україну кухонною та технічною сіллю. Є інші проекти, щодо яких будемо говорити з урядовцями. Однозначно, Закарпаття буде одним із драйверів у розвитку для всієї України, економічного, соціального зростання. Завершуємо цей день у Берегові зустрічю з представницями угорської громади України. Важлива зустріч, освітяни, медики, представники громадських та релігійних організацій та обов'язково наші воїни, яких мав честь я нагородити. Хоробрі та відважні воїни, якими ми пишаємось всі ми, українці, всі ми, громадяни України, всі захищають нашу державу і свободу, всі прагнуть перемоги для України, жити в Україні та розвивати життя тут заради своїх сімей, заради своїх дітей. Я дякую всім, хто захищає свободу, я дякую всім, хто б'ється за Україну. 128-ма окрема гірська штурмова Закарпатська бригада та 101-ша окрема бригада територіальної оборони. Я дякую вам, воїни, сьогодні особливо. Дякую вам усім, Берегово, Ужгород, Мукачево та все Закарпаття. Слава Україні!
And Herom Slava.
And Herom Slava. And that is the end of the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky here on the 525th day of the war. And that is the beginning of part 2 of the stream. The halftime is over. The beginning is now. And many of y'all have been talking in our live chat. At this moment, the live chat has been bumping 19 chats a minute. That is about one every few seconds. Not as fast as it was earlier. Maybe, I could start blowing it up. Like the Arby's guy says in those commercials, all of our food keeps blowing up. But anyways, with that, many of y'all have been talking about some many interesting things. And I want to make sure that we talk about them. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, so jumping right back into our poll segment, we have the first one here, while I get it pulled up on my phone. It says Erdogan has agreed to meet Putin to negotiate the Ukraine grain deal, and is Turkey backing down? It looks like 33% said yes, Turkey is backing down. 32% said, maybe, let's wait and see. 21% said no, Turkey wants to attempt peace first. And 14% said unsure. And to me, it looks like maybe Turkey is backing down. Of course, there's nothing wrong with attempting peace. That's always the preferable option. However, it's clear at this point that Turkey made statements suggesting that they would help escort those ships, and now it seems they faltered on that, and they're resorting back to talking with Putin to restart the grain deal. So, to me, it looks like they're backing off their promise, and, I wasn't really expecting them to go and get in a fight with Russia. That would have been an extreme step on Turkey's part, and, it was what it was. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say I didn't really expect the Turks to follow through with what they were saying about running the blockade. That was pretty severe as it goes. Not really a lot of countries outright do something like that in history ever, even when nuclear weapons are not involved. Now I know that YouTube's lying. Neil Wisnot has put in a super chat before. It says, celebrate the first super chat from Neil. It's like, no, that is not his first super chat. That's like the 90th one at least. But anyways, moving on from that, sorry, I got distracted by that because I was like, YouTube is just flat out coming up with nothing there. Anyways, I would say that I'm not that surprised that the Turks have kind of backed out of what they were saying, because clearly that was a little too ambitious in my opinion. It was great to hear though, but far too ambitious. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next poll says, Russian citizens are increasing attacks on military enlistment offices, and what do you think is the main cause? 80% said they are protesting forced enlistment. 13% said citizens don't want war with Russia, or excuse me, with Ukraine. 4% said unsure, and 3% said citizens don't feel protected. And to me, it seems like they're probably looking out for their own interests. They're probably attacking those offices because they are tired of being forcibly enlisted into Russia's military to fight in Ukraine. And I seriously doubt that they're doing this stuff because they're upset about the war itself. They're looking out for their own interests, like the Russians typically do. But Enforcer, what say you?
Well, interestingly enough, from what we've heard, the people who are attacking these recruitment offices are the elderly and women. And so that may actually be showing that they're against the conscription offices because they're taking either their sons or their husbands and having them killed in this war. And that may be the reason why they're attacking the conscription offices based off of who is attacking. But honestly, from what's understood, and if you ever watch a lot of training videos from back in the Cold War, it was even kind of understood back then that if a U.S. airman was to be shot down over enemy territory, for example, the Soviet Union, and they were trying to escape and evade capture, the people that they want to try and ally themselves with, or even talk to at all, that would be willing to listen to them, were women or the elderly. Those are usually just the groups that are a little bit more disillusioned with their governments for some reason, and so those are kind of like the target groups that U.S. airmen go for if they ever try and escape and evade, although that's really hard to escape and evade because a giant parachute, as you fall to the ground, kind of gives away where you are. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, at least in my opinion, based off what we're hearing, what we're seeing. And with that, we are on to the next one. But Matthew, I have seen something in the live chat that I feel is ultra super cliche.
What's that?
Wake up, sheeple! I've seen that so many times.
Sheep.
Well,
who's the sheep?
I don't know. I don't know who's the sheep. I have no idea. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one, done.
All right, and our next poll says the U.S. administration has asked Congress to give part of the Ukrainian budget to Taiwan for defense. And what are your thoughts? 53% said not good, do not divert Ukraine aid. 23% said it's fine, protect all interests at the same time. 13% said unsure, and 11% said only divert a small amount for Taiwan. And on this one, I am kind of shocked to hear this, to be completely honest. It looks like we're trying to give away part of Ukraine's budget to defend Taiwan. And while I do understand that there is a very credible threat from China toward Taiwan, I don't think we should take Ukraine's money and divert it over there. We probably have enough money, I'd imagine, to allot different funds for Taiwan and to have its own fund for Ukraine. So I don't think we should divert it. But Enforcer, what say you?
I don't think we should divert it. I don't know what the hell it is with people. I gotta say this, y'all. Let me go in a little bit of a rant here about budgeting. I don't know what the hell it is with people and acting like there is a finite amount of money. Has any of y'all ever seen what the U.S. government has been doing in the past 5 years? We just print up money whenever we need it. Like, where the hell does the trillion come for the infrastructure bill that was $1 trillion? Or all the money that we got for the stimulus packages that was in the trillions each? That was just printed up out of thin air. You know, and that's something that I don't really think a lot of people are understanding, is that if the government wants to do something, it just makes the money. You know, there's no real concern about, you know, are we, you know, we have like $1,000, how do we spend that 1,000? They go, we have an unlimited budget, and if we need to spend it on anything, we'll just spend it on something. And that's just kind of how the U.S. Monetary system works at this point, or at least the government funding works at this point. So, you know, it's a little silly to me that we're sitting here and saying, oh, let's divvy up the money, because it's like, print up some money to go to Ukraine, print up some money to go to Taiwan, and, you know, just to stop the people from complaining that act like for some reason homelessness can be fixed, print up a little bit of money to go fight homelessness or something, and then it'll never be fixed anyways, and people will complain about it from 20 years' time going, oh, why isn't the government paying to fix homelessness? Well, because there's no way to fix it. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, because and that's something that always just blows me away, is when people act like the U.S. government has a finite amount of money, or even an understanding that there is a limit to the amount of money that we can spend. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. And also, like I said, the money pinner, I go brr.
The money pinner.
As I can't speak. Yes, I still can't speak. My mouth isn't connected to my brain tonight. It's like I want to say certain things, but my mouth isn't saying it. But anyways.
Really quickly though, before we move on, I'm seeing a lot of people saying, but the money will be worthless. Well, then how come we've been able to do this for the past 5 years all out, and the money is worthless?
We're 33 trillion in debt. The money's not worthless yet.
And let's go U.S. debt graph by year. Let's just go look at that. Oh, look at that. Wow. Well, actually, that doesn't show the years. Let me go find one that shows. Wow. Look at that. Since 2010. Look at that lending. That is just huge. And wow, the money.
You see, the key here is, though, if you're going to print money, you want to print it slowly over time, and you don't want to print it all at one time, really rapidly within a year or two. And, you know, some folks don't know that, apparently. But, you know, you live and learn. And right now we're learning.
Let's see. Let me find one that's over the past few years. All right. So here is the inflation percentage per year. And we're really only caring about everything past 09. All right. So let's just keep that in mind. The inflation rate up until about 2021, I would assume 2022, has been less than 4%. Every single year. And now let's go back to the U.S. debt graph and notice, look, 2010, we lend to hell and back. We're just pumping up money wherever the hell we need it. And then the inflation rate, and honestly, the inflation rate through those years appears to historically be lower than the inflation rates during the 2000s and the 90s, or hell, even the 80s or the 70s. Honestly, that looks like the lowest amount of inflation that there could be had on the graph, suggesting one of two things. Either lending is actually good to keep inflation down, or books are being cooked like some kind of a fine sirloin. One or the other, but that is still a little interesting to see. And I know a lot of people are saying, you know, oh, you know, like, you know, it's not good to build debt or anything like that. But all countries in the world have debt. And you'll see that especially the largest countries in the world rack up debt tabs that are the largest. No one can even get close to them. They dwarf everyone else. And considering that the United States is the largest economy in the world, it only makes sense that the U.S. would have the largest debt in the world. And of course, another thing I'd like to point out, everyone, that we kind of touched on a little bit when it was happening, and then we didn't touch on it again, is did anyone notice that the whole debt ceiling pandemonium that was happening about a month ago has ended because they actually just raised the debt ceiling, and just kind of did it quietly after they freaked everyone out again? Has anyone noticed that? Rather than me?
Yeah, it definitely happened.
Yeah, because that would just be dumb not to. And some people are saying, is this politics? No. This is not politics.
Just economics.
This is talking about how the U.S. prints money and why it doesn't really matter if we split the money that we're sending to Ukraine to Taiwan, because we could just send all the money we want to Ukraine and then we could print out more money to just send to Taiwan and then continue to run everything in the U.S. government, the actual bureaucracy of it, like we normally do. And there's really no reason to try and act like we're running on finite funds, because lending is clearly not leading to any kind of inflation due to an increase of the amount of U.S. dollars, at least.
Wait a minute, what? Say that part again.
The lending isn't really crediting itself to a massive increase in inflation.
Well, on that part, I would have to strongly disagree. It definitely is. But the catch is it justified or not? And of course, I would dive into politics. But on the international front, we're printing money and spending money on Ukraine, Taiwan, and all of our other interests that we usually spend money on. I would say that's probably justified, but obviously some things aren't. And we're spending a lot of money right now.
Well, I hope that does address that all fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and moving on to our next poll. It says Russia attacked Ukrainian ports on the Danube again today, and Romania calls it unacceptable. It says thoughts. And 87% said Russia is playing dangerous with NATO. 5% said unsure, 5% said it depends if Russia continues, and 4% said these attacks are not a big deal. And to me, I think Russia is certainly playing dangerous with NATO, and that's intentional. Obviously, you don't want to attack right on the NATO border because there is always a margin for error. The accuracy in Russia is not exactly what you'd call top-notch, and they could easily hit Romania by accident and cause a very unfortunate situation to break out. But it seems like the Russians don't care, and that's probably part of the reason why they're attacking right on the border. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say that this is a serious. This is once again getting close to serious escalation, considering that this area of the Danube River where these missiles are hitting is jointly controlled by the Ukrainians and Romanians. I would say that this is once again the Russians playing with fire and possibly having one of those missiles land inside of Romanian territory and possibly kill someone, which will seriously start to escalate in between the NATO world and Russia. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, at least in my opinion. And with that, and it's very interesting because all I was talking about is all the lending that everyone was doing over the past 10 years, and now everyone in the live chat, of course, is trying to throw one party or the other on us.
I want to ask this question real quick. I want to ask this question, not political whatsoever, to the audience, because I see some folks are strongly disagreeing with what we said or what the Enforcer said or I said about the economic situation. Do y'all think that printing and spending more money than we have, meaning going into debt, does that directly cause inflation, or is inflation caused primarily by other means? Because I'm curious to see where other people are coming from on that. It looks like some people disagree where we were coming from, so I'm curious to see what y'all think. There is definitely a factual answer to the question, but of course, everybody has a different perspective on it.
And so with that, I hope I'll give answers to that, interestingly enough. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and let me grab one more thing out of the live chat here. Excuse me. Real quick, and also we're out of polls, by the way, and for some reason it is not copying and pasting, of course. There we go. All right, so with that being said, we're moving on to our Super Chat questions, and first off, we have a $130 donation, extremely generous, from Tom J. Oatley. And Tom, it's good to see you once again, and thank you very much for that massive support. He says, early next year, I am moving to Croatia, and from there to Ukraine. Croatia supports Ukraine, and there is no red tape. I will be humanitarian, since I will be AA gunner, eliminating caliber missiles. Nice.
Dang, son, you okay?
Dang, man, I about died.
Oh,
go ahead.
Well, I thought you were going to read the rest of it.
That was it.
And so,
oh, there's some more. It
yeah,
just got
there
cut
is.
off.
Yeah.
It says, and being an AA gunner, eliminating caliber missiles and shot heads, I'm in the process of selling my estate and properties.
And thank you so much for the massive amount of support, Tom, and helping this channel to keep on running. And welcome back. It's been a while since we've seen you here, and it's great to have you here tonight. And thank you so much once again for supporting this channel and helping this thing to keep on rolling. That's massive support and will certainly help this channel to keep alive and keep on running. And to address that, I wish you the best of luck, because taking a journey like that is going to be a pretty big one, and I hope that everything works well with that, because I've got to be honest with you, I wouldn't even know where to begin doing something like that. And I got to say, that's pretty brave, and I hope that you are able to make it to Ukraine and be an amazing AA gunner to hopefully shoot down those Shaheeds and calibers that are entering their airspace. And so, with that, thank you so much once again for the massive amount of support and helping this channel to keep on running, and I wish you the best of luck with that endeavor, because you are undertaking something that many people have not done before. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are now going to be moving on into the next one.
All right, and the next one goes to Joseph Coates, who puts in a very generous $50 donation as well. And thank you very much, Joseph, for that support. He says, former U.S. Air Force combat controller, and requests to join the LSA combat control teams. And I've been watching you all since day one and really enjoy your assessments, and well done. And thank you very much, Joseph, for the kind words as well.
And thank you so much, Joseph. And based off of how the people have reacted to my thoughts on finances and government budgeting, I have a feeling that I have greatly turned people away from our assessments. But you know, that is something for another time. But still, thank you so much for the kind words, and thank you so much for enjoying this channel, because it really does blow us away when folks say that they have a military background, and that they actually enjoy our show. Because one thing that we've dealt with over 525 days are keyboard warriors that either have never been in the military and they act like they know everything. And of course, I don't know everything, but it's really annoying when, you know, just some random person just comes onto your show and wants to give you crap in your live chat. Or people who were in the military and, you know, they act like, oh, you have to be a part of the creed to talk about it. Like, you know, it's something that's forbidden for the lowly citizen to talk about, which is something that is just annoying. But I guess still got to thank you so much once again for the high praise for our assessments and our news. And thank you so much for being an old guard. Being here since day one, that is crazy, actually. Very few people were here for day one. I think only around 100 or so people were. And I got to thank you so much once again for the high praise of the channel and the massive support, because folks like you help to support this channel and help us to keep this thing rolling. And so, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that fairly well. And of course, you can be a part of the LSA combat control teams. We don't really have any official militaristic structure of the Leaf Spring Army. It's kind of like the Salvation Army in a way. You know, it's just an army by name. But, you know, beyond that, it's just really neat stuff. But I don't think we have any LSA combat control teams, but you can be the first if you want to be. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address that fairly well. And thank you so much for enjoying this channel, especially with the background you have. And so with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much once again for the support. And also, I see some people saying, oh, it's all gatekeeping. It kind of is. You know, it's something that kind of annoys me with a lot of things in the world, is that, you know, nothing is really special enough to gatekeep, to be quite honest. Like, you know, reenacting, gun collecting, being in the military, being a doctor, being a lawyer, it does take expertise and knowledge in those areas to do those things. But at the same time, I don't really like the people who act like it's, you know, it's below them to talk to someone about it, or for an outsider to talk about it, because, you know, it's like, it is a free country after all. People can talk about whatever they want. And also, that is just trying, you know, because I guess some of these folks just never had a feeling of superiority in their lives. They want to feel like they have some kind of level of superiority over other people because of their experiences and backgrounds, which I just find to be really rude. And that's also why we don't act like that, unless if someone is just really snarky, then we do act like that a little bit. But I always try and make sure to be welcoming to new people. And that's also why some people think we're patronizing folks, is because sometimes we go through very in-depth explanations on this stream of very basic things. And that's because we don't want to be excluding people who may be new to this whole thing. They may just support Ukraine, but they don't really know anything else about how militaries function or the weaponry involved or anything like that. And that's sometimes why we go through really deep dives on very basic things that a lot of y'all may know, and then some of y'all don't, because I don't ever want anyone to feel like it's being gate kept or anything like that, because as long as anyone wants to support Ukraine or is interested in the topic, I think everything available should be given to them so that way they can also learn and understand what's going on. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And thank you so much once again for the support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $30 super chat from Drunky Monkey. And thank you very much, Drunky, for the super chat. He said, good days, guys. Or excuse me, good day, guys. And keep up the great work.
And thank you so much for wishing us a great day. I hope you had a great one as well. And thank you so much for helping us to keep up the good work. Because people always enjoy the great work. But folks like you who go out of your way to support this channel, y'all help us to keep the great work going. If it wasn't for y'all, we wouldn't be able to do this as a job and do this kind of work. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And I hope you had a great day as well. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one we have is from Santiago Flores, who puts in a $25 donation. And thank you very much, Santiago, as well, for that very generous support. He says, for the law school coffee fund, you will need it, burning the midnight oil and a bit under the weather, but will recover. Pick a question from the live chat, please. And Santiago, I was in your position just a couple of weeks ago, or actually less than that. And I do hope you get better soon, because it does suck to be sick. I was sick for an entire month. But Enforcer, what say you?
And I thank you so much for the support. And if you are sick, I hope you get better. Sickness is terrible. Luckily, I never get sick. I don't know why, I just don't. But Matthew got sick, and it was bad sick. Really bad sick. Hopefully, he got better.
Yes, I'm better, but I still have the cough lingering slightly.
But still, thank you so much once again for support, Sonic. I'm gonna hopefully law school isn't that tough. I'm honestly kind of hoping it's not, because I would really like to try and keep up running the show on the schedule we do. I enjoy it greatly, and it started to hit me a little bit, especially when we started trying to do a rollback last week and we took Thursday off. I was like, what the hell do we do? I was like, I've been doing this for a year and a half now. I have no idea what I do at 9 to 12 every single night now. So, or really, not just the stream itself, really from 5:30 to 12, because that entire time is eaten up with getting the stream ready and running it. So I was like, what do I do? I was like, we can't do that. I told Matthew after that Thursday, I was like, listen, man, we're not rolling back or nothing. We're just going to run these things nonstop until we can't, because otherwise I don't know what to do, and I feel like our entire lives have been turned upside down at this point. So with that, thank you so much once again for the support, Santiago. I hope that does address that fairly well, and thank you for being an old guard of this channel and helping us to keep this thing rolling. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And real quick, I was so fascinated by the topic we just got off of, I had to put a poll up about it. The question is, does printing money, i.e. spending money that we do not have, directly cause inflation? 47% said yes, it is the primary cause. 42% said it's one of the many factors. 4% said no, it's not a factor in inflation. And 6% said unsure. And I would say it's one of the many factors. I don't think it's the primary cause, but it is certainly one of the bigger causes of inflation going up, in my opinion. Obviously, I'm no expert in economics whatsoever. This is just my understanding of it. Also, obviously, supply and demand plays a pretty large part. Not necessarily in inflation, but it does drive up costs. And spending money that we don't have, meaning going into debt, obviously that causes money to devalue. So the U.S. is now $33 trillion in debt, and we've been adding a lot to the deficit here really recently, which is what has caused inflation to go skyrocketing, and also what's caused the interest rates and everything to go up to try to counter that inflation by making people basically hold on to their money. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that going off of these two graphs and just going off of these alone, because I will admit, I know a lot about history and a decent amount, not everything, but a decent amount about military equipment. Most of your mainstream stuff, not your radars or anything like that. I almost have no idea about that stuff. But looking at these graphs and trying to relate inflation rates to the amount of lending at any given year, if you notice, the inflation rates per year appear to not even correlate whatsoever to the amount of lending. And it's in, like, for example, in the 80s, if we see this graph here, this starts in June of 1980, which would be exactly right here, at the very first recession of the 80s. We can see that while foreign lending, well, more so just the national debt, we'll just call it the debt instead, was rising gradually at that moment, the inflation rate was the highest it has been in the past 40 or so years. It was at 14%, and over the next several years, it would stay almost as high all the way up until about 1983 as around 5 point something percent. And the national debt was hardly increasing at all. Compare that to every single year beyond 2010, where we can see that the graph takes a massive exponential climb, and we can see that the inflation rate beyond 2009 has actually remained lower than it was really during any other year from 1980 onwards, all the way up until about 2021 and 2022, which I believe that inflation may actually have been caused from the plague due to a decrease in consumer goods, and therefore the prices of everything just kind of started to skyrocket because the availability of products was fewer, although people still had the same purchasing power, so therefore the prices had to adjust to the relative amount of products. But every other year, it doesn't really seem, just looking at these, and of course I got to say this, I'm not an expert, so, don't try and grill me and make it sound like I'm trying to be an expert here. I'm just looking at the graphs and what they say. It doesn't really look from these graphs that inflation rates are directly related to the amount of national debt that we incur per year, or even correlates to it just a year or two later in lag. So I would say that based off of that and going off of our poll results, I would have to say it is a factor, but I think it may actually be one of the smaller factors involved in inflation, in my opinion, just based off of these two charts. But what do you think about that, Matthew? Because I think you might know a little bit more in that field than me.
And what specific topic were you referencing?
The national debt directly correlating to inflation. I have a feeling you were probably paying attention to something else during that time.
I mean, really, it's the debt number itself is kind of insignificant, like 31.5 trillion. I don't even think that's the most accurate one, by the way. I think it's gone up to like 32 or 33. But that number itself is just symbolic. But what isn't symbolic is how fast we're spending the money. I think that's what causes the inflation to go wild, and that's what we're seeing right now. And when interest rates start going up, that's a response to the inflation rate increasing dramatically. They're trying to discourage lending, and they're trying to discourage people from spending money because they're trying to get people to hold on to it in the hopes the inflation will go down. I'm not exactly sure like the nuances of that, how that's supposed to help it. I couldn't explain that properly or intelligently. So somebody that knows a little bit more about it would have to explain that part.
And of course, and I have to say this again, this is something that I don't really know much on. And I want to make that very clear up front. I'm not really a big pro on economics. That's of course, I'm not even good at math. So being a big pro at economics, which feels largely to revolve around numbers, is something I would probably have a very big weak spot on. But just based off of my layman interpretation of these graphs, it doesn't ever really appear that the amount of lending or the national debt has really anything to do with inflation. It honestly appears that more so economic policies have more to do with inflation, or calamities have more to do with inflation than really anything else, at least from what we're seeing on this graph. But, of course, that is all something for a whole other show that isn't ours, because we don't really talk about the fiscal spending or anything like that. We talk about Ukraine, and that's really it. So I don't really have a lot of experience or knowledge on this, but that's what I kind of think based off of the graphs. But, if y'all think different, please feel free to, because I'm not the be-all, end-all, expert, know-it-all on that whatsoever. That's just how I'm looking at it from the graphs. And also, someone said, yeah, economics is more complicated. Everyone always says that economics is complicated, but I've never really looked into it enough to know how complicated it is. I have a feeling
it can get very complicated, especially if you're trying to do forecast and predictions.
Yeah, I have a feeling that turns into rocket science pretty quickly, because if anything has to do with money, it's easy for it to turn into rocket science. I feel like finances and spending is sometimes more complicated and more advanced than really anything else people do, because money is a big deal. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next one goes to Sig for Life, who puts in a $20 donation. And thank you very much for the support. They said 2 cups of Black Rifle coffee, good stuff.
And thank you so much for the support. And the way you read that, Matthew, I was expecting something else behind that. But still, thank you so much for the 2 cups of Black Rifle coffee. And I've got to thank you so much for helping us to get some coffee. I drink Nitro Busy Cold Brew, and I had a lot of it tonight. Probably about 10 fluid ounces of it, which is probably like 400 milligrams. And that's just to keep myself going. I don't even know what kind of milligrams Black Rifle coffee has, but hopefully it's a lot. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are now going to be moving on into the next one. But thank you so much once again for the coffee fund.
Indeed. And, excuse me. Up next, we have a $20 super chat from Thomas Marsh. And thank you very much, Thomas, for the support. He says, for my two favorite future lawyers, and don't forget to enjoy the summer you have left. And let's go. And Thomas, we actually have the first summer off, believe it or not. We will have the entire 3 or 4 month period next year off, which is rare for us because we didn't take any summers off during college. We went all the way every single semester and finished a little bit early. But in law school, we will actually get to take the break because we really don't have an option. But, you know, it's good to have a break, I think, because I think we'll be tired by then. But Enforcer, what say you?
Thank you so much for the support to your two favorite lawyers. That's something that you don't really hear a lot in the modern world. Most people hate attorneys until they need them, and then they like them, and then they get screwed over by an attorney, and then they hate them again. It's like a vicious cycle. But anyways, thank you so much once again for the support, and thank you so much for the kind words as well. Hopefully we will be able to get a break at some point. But there will be a break in between the fall and spring semesters. We know that. It won't be long. It'll be about a month long. But still, it will be a break, and that will be nice. Hopefully they won't assign some reading or something for the next classes the next semester over that break, because that would kind of be sad, and it would make me cry. But nonetheless, thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address that fairly well, and thank you so much for the kind words. And with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you so much once again.
Indeed. I see some folks giving some suggestions for a successful presidential campaign on the part of the Enforcer. They said, double everyone's budget and you'll win immediately. Oh, yes. Yes. No, you should totally run on a platform of raising taxes for everyone. Raise taxes for everyone. Tell them they're not going to get any new roads. They're not going to get anything extra. And that you're going to hire a bunch of new IRS agents, too. You'll get elected right off the bat.
Anyways, we're on to the next one.
Man, if that's politics, that's I'm telling you. But anyways, up next we have a $20 donation from Aaron Cooper, and thank you very much, Aaron, for that support. He does not leave a comment, but thank you very much for helping to keep the channel running. And Enforcer, what say you?
And I thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, Aaron. Folks like you who go out of your way to support this channel help this thing to keep rolling. And while you didn't leave a comment, your contribution to helping this channel to keep on going speaks louder than any comment that could be put under that super chat. And I got to thank you so much once again for the support, because if it wasn't for folks like you that helped this channel to keep on running, we wouldn't have been able to be here tonight. We wouldn't have been able to be here for 525 days. And so thank you so much once again. And I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and I see here that someone said, get the Barbary books for before law school. We actually have been given a subscription to Themis or whatever it's called, the bar prep thing already. So that's supposed to be really good, so I'll take the school's word for it and have to give that a go. Also, the bar is a decent ways off, and I'm not going to start studying for that until law school is over. But I'll have to check out that Barbary. I've heard about that many times from many different people. What about you, Enforcer?
I've heard about Hanna-Barbera.
Yeah, they're pretty good.
Yeah, I think that's a great law source right there. It's someone's going to use that.
You're going to be watching Barney Rubble and Fred Flintstone for your bar prep.
Yeah, totally. Like, what could go wrong? I mean, didn't they have a bar?
They had a quarry.
Close enough. But anyways, with that, I hope that addresses that fairly well. And I'm just kidding, by the way. But with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next one goes to Nick. He puts in a $20 donation, and thank you very much for the support. He says, good work, and thank you.
Well, thank you so much for the support, and thank you for saying good work. I'm very glad to know that tonight has lived up to folks' expectations. Many people have grand expectations for the show, and sadly, we let them down every single night. But nonetheless, I do thank you so much for saying it's good work, because we try our best to make this show watchable, in some way, shape, or form. And so with that, thank you so much once again, and thank you so much for the support and helping this thing to keep rolling. And with that, we are on to the next one. And someone just said avoiding taxes is one of the most American things you can do.
That's one of the most criminal things you could do.
The IRS has something to say about that. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
And then there's some people that are like, well, there's tax avoidance, and then there's tax
evasion,
dodging or something. They'll come up with some like sneaky like wording for it to like justify trying to get around paying taxes. It's like it's still the same thing, and that's still not going to save you from the crime.
Man, remember
but
that,
if you want to believe that, go right ahead.
Remember that one guy we were slightly associated with who ended up bragging to friends and coworkers that he had completely avoided paying taxes for like 5 years?
Yeah.
That honestly, I've got to say this. That's a little stupid to be bragging to people about committing federal crimes. That just sounds like it's not really a smart thing to do. And I was like, why in the world would you brag to people about that if you were doing that? You know, that doesn't make any sense. And I'm one, although I think that taxes for an individual, for the government, are kind of like a drop in the bucket. I'm a big fan of paying taxes because I'm scared of the IRS, really. But with that,
yeah, nobody screws with the IRS. Not even the Joker and Batman did.
Dude, not even Al Capone. You know, Al Capone killed hundreds of people. But you know who really got him? It was the IRS. It wasn't the police. It wasn't the FBI. It was the IRS. And you sound like Al Capone right now, Matty. You sound like you got some kind of a bad disease.
Yeah, I'm telling you. Watch out, Buster.
He was from Chicago. He was from Chicago. You got the wrong accent.
His accent is so cringe, I'm going to stop it right now before I cause people to get sick.
Oh, man, people are going to be going, this is so cringe, man. What the hell is going on around here? But anyways, with that, we're on to the next.
It's almost said tax avoidance is definitely not a crime. Good luck at law school. Well, you can play word games all day long, but if you tell somebody tax avoidance versus tax evasion, you know, in my book, that's just playing word games. It means almost the same thing. There are ways to cut down your tax bill, but to use words like avoidance and evasion, I personally wouldn't use words like that.
It's kind of like it's kind of like saying I didn't shoot at the guy, I shot near him and the bullet hit him. It's like, well, you still murdered him, you know. It's like it doesn't really matter how you try and word it. The man's dead, you know. It's like, you know, and people always try and get caught up in the words that lead to the end goal. But this is the thing: if you killed someone and it wasn't in self-defense, regardless of how you try and word that, that is murder. If you do not pay taxes, regardless of how you try and word it, and you were supposed to pay those taxes, that is tax evasion. You know,
no, man, his head made contact with a bullet. It wasn't a killing.
Yeah, you see, I wasn't throwing the stapler at him. I was throwing the stapler around him, and he just got in the way. You know, it's like...
You see, I was throwing a punch, and he just happened to put his face in front of it.
You see, I was just walking, I was just driving my car near the kindergarten, and I just... And the kindergarten was in the way, you know, and I just ran him over. You know, it's like that stuff doesn't really work much when you actually get down to it, because you're gonna be like, well, you still ran him over, you know, or you still shot him, or you still didn't pay your taxes.
There are people that actually say that in real life, by the way. There are people that will, like, you know, have a charge like that'll, you know, have ended up doing something bad to somebody, and they will say, well, I didn't mean to do that. He just happened to get in the way. It's like, well, that doesn't work like that. It's like you still did it.
And some people are saying using legal loopholes isn't a crime, but legal loopholes are actually a lot more few and far in between than people believe. Legal loopholes are like 1 in a million, like true loopholes. You know, there's other things like police officers writing out tickets wrong, where they put down the wrong vehicle on the ticket. That isn't really a loophole. That's more like catching a clerical error or something like that. But true loopholes in the law that just allow for things to just be completely dropped, although they shouldn't be, those rarely exist from what we've seen, well, at least from what I've seen and what I understand. But anyways, I'm scared of the IRS. Make sure to pay your taxes. So with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next we have a $20 super chat from Drunky Monkey once again. And thank you once again for the second support. He says, oh, and Shoyu!
Shoyu! And thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And I hope that does address that fairly well. And I hope you enjoyed that. And so with that, thank you so much once again. And we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next one goes to Daniel Gill, who puts in a $20 donation. And thank you very much, Daniel, for the support. He says, I was just in Kyiv, Ukraine. So many brave and nice people.
And thank you so much for the support. And really cool to hear that you're just in Kyiv. There are loads of brave, amazing Ukrainian people. And it's amazing to know that folks have been able to meet them and have been able to talk to them a little bit, because they are always incredible to listen to and to also talk to all together. And so with that, thank you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next we have a $20 super chat from BC Skyman, as well as a $20 super chat from Snow White. And thank you very much to the both of you for that support. And sadly, no comments to address, but of course, that will keep the channel running, and we do appreciate it very much. And Enforcer, what say you?
And I got to thank both of y'all so much once again for y'all support. Y'all support helps this channel to keep on running. Y'all didn't throw in comments, but y'all are legends. And speaking of legends, the OG Ellison Bosun has arrived. But moving on from that, we'll get to him in a minute. I want to thank both of y'all so much once again for the support and helping this thing to keep on rolling. Because while y'all didn't throw in comments, y'all's support means a lot and it says a lot, as it allows us to continue to listen to the sounds of our voices for hours on end, days a week. And so with that, thank you so much to both of y'all so much once again. And so much. And so much. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. And up next, we have a $50 super chat from Walter A. Lakota Jr. And thank you very much, Walter, for that support. And also, welcome back. He says, aloha, the Enforcer Matt, and LSA from OG Ellison Bosun. And it seems what Russia did in St. Petersburg to African leaders is a little telling into how come Russia left the grain deal, and maybe how come Russia is destroying Ukraine ports.
And I thank you so much for the support, Walter, and I'd have to agree with that completely. It seemed as though at that St. Petersburg meeting, Putin was kind of trying to blackmail African countries into buying Russian grain instead of buying Ukrainian grain, and it appears that the Russians are forcefully trying to knock out the Ukrainian competition by destroying the grain transporting infrastructure at the Ukrainian ports. So I think that certainly is telling what the Russian plan may be. That may be an attempt to hopefully, in their minds, finance this war for a little bit longer by hooking the Africans on Russian grain instead of Ukrainian grain. That may be their end goal. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support, Walter, and thank you for coming back tonight. Great to have you on, and thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running from our OG Ellison Bosun. And with that, we are on to the next one. But thank you so much once again for the support.
All right. And up next, we have a $10 super chat from Psyops. And thank you very much, Psyops, for the support. And, excuse me, I am so sorry for this cough tonight. I don't know what's making it flare up. But Psyops puts in a song, and he knows that Enforcer Matt, he's opposed to song. So I have to send this over to the Enforcer to sing song. So let me go ahead and send this over.
Let me see here. Let me find it. Let's see here. Let's see here. Oh, here we go. It's set to "Can't Touch This" by MC Hammer. I don't know. I don't know who I don't know what that is. I've got to be honest.
That's that guy who not touch it. You know, don't touch this. Yeah, you know the pans and everything.
Yeah, but I don't know how the lyrics work with that because I'm reading the lyrics over here, and I'm kind of at a loss. I'm a little bit at a loss. A loss.
I'm telling you,
oh, man,
I don't know.
I'm telling you, oh man, I don't even know what
Psyops, we're gonna probably bring you on eventually to sing these songs because these songs are tough.
I don't even know. I don't even know how in the world to read these lyrics and make them work. I don't know how, but I thank you so much for the support, Psyops. I don't think I can read that because I don't really know how the actual song went for "Can't Touch This" rather than the dun 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 dun. So I don't really know what else to do beyond that. So I don't know how to read off the lyrics. But I do thank you for the support, Psyops, and helping this channel to keep on running. And instead of reading off those lyrics, because I would butcher that terribly, let's go and grab a live chat in honor of the super chat. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, and also I saw Psyops got flamed by an individual a second ago. I do apologize, Psyops, for that. I'm not sure what's up with that situation, but anyways, moving on to our live chat questions. We have one from Tank2, who says, is there a mechanism by which Russia can be expelled from the UN Security Council? It hardly seems right that they be allowed the privileges and responsibilities to that position.
There is no mechanism that can remove the Russians from that council. If there was one, the U.S. could also be removed from that council. All 5 members on the UN Security Council are permanent members. There is no process to remove any of them, and if one of those countries goes through a government change, for example, the Soviet Union turning into the Russian Federation, the Russian Federation then inherits that spot on the Security Council. So unfortunately, there is absolutely no way to remove the Russians from the Security Council. It was made that way so that way they would join, because the Soviet Union at the time when the Security Council in the UN was made was saying that due to the House being stacked with 3 Western countries versus the Russians and the Chinese, if it was by a majority vote, the three Western countries could just eventually majority vote the Soviet Union and the Chinese off of the Security Council, and so a compromise was made to where there would be no way to actually remove anyone off of the Security Council, and on top of that, if only one of them just vetoed a decision, that decision could not happen. So sadly, there is no way to get them off the UN Security Council through official means. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, and I thank you so much, Psyops, for involuntarily sponsoring that live chat, but thank you so much for the support nonetheless. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you once again.
All right, and up next, we have a $10 super chat from Jay Bagwell, and thank you very much, Jay, for the support. He says, from the quote-unquote what not to do on the first day of law school files, showing up wearing a black robe, white powdered wig, and yelling, order, order.
Order! Order! The right honourable gentleman in the back will be quiet. No, I'm going to call him Dodgy Dave. Get him out of here. But anyways, man, I remember that day in the House of Commons like it was yesterday. The House of Commons, like speaking about it non-politically, is truly entertaining to watch. It's something you can actually watch for just entertainment purposes. That's something you cannot say about the House of Representatives or the Senate, or really the Congress altogether in the U.S. It is incredibly boring and very mundane to watch. I'm going to be completely honest. But the House of Commons, Matthew, if you've watched it, that is hilarious.
Yeah, I've seen it before. It'll be hilarious if it wasn't actually their government. But, you know, that's actually the way the thing runs. I don't know how it runs that way because it's like a free-for-all. Everybody gets up and takes shots at everyone else, and they only rarely kick people out. So, you know, if it works for them, it works. But I don't know how that would actually work in the U.S. We would have some mayhem going on over here.
Well, I'm going to say this, though, in the defense of the Parliament has been able to keep Britain way on up there. I mean, I think it's the fourth largest economy in the Western world, and so it apparently isn't that bad of a governance system, because somehow they've been able to keep on up there towards top dog in the Western world for a very long time. So while it looks weird and it's just entertaining and almost like a blood bowl as far as like political or governmental structures run, it is still pretty entertaining. I mean, you can't lie. You know, like when you have eccentric people from both sides, like Dennis Skinner or Jacob Rees-Mogg, and he gets up in like in a morning suit, you know, and he's like, Mr. Speaker, you know, it's like, what the hell is this? It's like, you know, and then people are saying that, I would like to call the minister an absolute, I mean, let me think of something they'd actually say.
Dodgy Dave.
Yeah, Dodgy Dave. Like, it's like,
get him out of here. He called him Dodgy Dave. It's like, that's lightweight compared to what goes on in the U.S. when it comes to insults. They call him Dodgy Dave. That was like nothing.
Man, I got to tell you, I get a kick out of it. And some people are like, oh, politics forbidden. Oh, no. Here's the one thing. There is actually a loophole to that rule for us. As long as we critique both sides or just talk about the thing as like standing back from it and just looking at the whole thing altogether, we can talk about it that way. My rule about no politics is picking a side. That's where the no politics rule comes in. You can make fun of the whole thing as long as you include both sides. Well, actually, we don't really want that in the chat because I know someone's going to find some way to rig that where they are actually making fun of just one side alone and trying to make it look like it's fair. But, you know, we...
Indeed, and also we're the president, so we can declassify it if we choose.
Listen, if the president does it, he is not guilty. I'm not a crook.
But anyways, with that...
Big facts. Big facts.
Huge facts. Great facts. You just can't beat it.
But anyways, with that... Oh, yeah, Skinner retired, really? Huh.
Oh man, he's out now.
Man, now he's now. I always knew it was Dodgy Dave. Get him out of here. I'm retiring. And then he just leaves. But anyways, with that, just explaining the no politics rule really quickly, so that way everyone kind of gets. We can't touch on political topics. Just that we have to take a step back, be unbiased, and just critique all sides fairly. And that's why I also, if y'all noticed, picked Dennis Skinner, who a member of the Labor Party, and also Jacob Rees-Mogg, a Conservative and Unionist Party member, because it's a fair critique, because they're both very colorful characters on both sides, and they're both funny. You know, if you look at it neutrally, they are funny. But anyways, with that, way on to the next one.
All right, and up next, we have another $10 super chat from Psyops, and he puts in another song. And he says, let's see here.
I don't know what to do.
No, he doesn't put that in. No. But he put in some more stuff about the same song, I think. So he's wanting you to reread the same thing about the same song about Can't Touch It by the fella. And I'm going to leave this one up to you.
Is it the one that says Enforcer Matt song?
No, it's Andrew's song.
Andrew's song. It's set to Can't Touch. Wait a minute. You already read that one, I believe. Because I'm looking.
Oh no, there was a Matt song and then there's an Andrew song.
Well, I'm looking through them all, and it looks that there's only one of them.
I can send this one to you if you'd like.
Well, the problem is that my Discord is still not working on my phone, because of multiple reasons. So I would have to open it up on the computer screen, and then everyone would see it. So, there's really no way for me to get it.
Well, I guess we'll just have to take a live chat in honor of PsyOps.
All right. So what do we got?
All right, and the live chat question goes to Martin Hogg, who says, if the war in Ukraine stopped tomorrow, what would happen with NATO and world sanctions?
Reread that one again.
If the war in Ukraine stopped tomorrow, what would happen with NATO and world sanctions?
I don't really know. They would certainly stay in place until after the war because an official decision would have to be made on all of them. But I have a feeling that they would probably get lifted. Because the whole thing is that they're punitive. You see, if they're permanent, there's really no benefit for the Russians to end the war in the hopes that the sanctions would be lifted. So they probably would be lifted in months' time after the war had ended. So with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And thank you so much, once again, for the support, helping this channel keep on rolling psyops, and once again, involuntarily sponsoring a live chat. But thank you so much once again. And also, well, no, we won't address that. But with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Junebug72, who puts in a $10 donation. And thank you very much. She said, good evening and good stream so far.
Hey!
so far.
So
I like the
far.
little addition. Okay, keep going. And perhaps you can take a live chat for me. Thank you. And Slava Ukraine.
And Slava Ukrainian. Thank you for saying it was good so far. I'm sure we've let you down in between when that super chat came in and now. But we will make sure to get a live chat. And so with that, what do we got?
And this question goes to Null Context, who says, do you feel like the gap between the Baltics and Russia is truly under threat?
Yes. With Wagner forces in the area, and considering the relative size of the gap, it is almost constantly under a state of threat. So it's a massive NATO liability, in all honesty. So it requires some very stringent fortifying. Or more so, some very overabundant fortifying. I think that would be better wordage for that. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. Thank you so much once again for support and sponsoring that live chat. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next, we have a $10 super chat from Rob Kegsor, and thank you very much, Rob, for the support. And he says, Enforcer Matt, my wife is an attorney and passed bar in Illinois and New York and worked for Bar Prep many years and created test prep questions and knows Richard Conviser says law school is hard and please take it seriously. And we're definitely going to take it seriously, but I hope it isn't as difficult as possible. I have a feeling that's very subjective depending on the person. And also, since we come from a household where that's been spoken about our whole life, hopefully something has rubbed off on us and it won't be as foreign to us as it might be to some other people. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say, hopefully, something's rubbed off on us. Our father is an attorney. Our father is a lawyer. But that doesn't allow us to act like assholes, see? That's how most kids act from attorneys. I don't know why. But we don't act like, you know, a whole bunch of mean people. But hopefully, like Matthew said, something's rubbed off on us, and hopefully we have some kind of extra knowledge. If we didn't, I'd be scared. But still, thank you for the support. And that's really cool to hear that your wife made LSAT prep questions. Those may have been some of the ones I used, because we used 7 Sage. Not that we're sponsored by him, but we used 7 Sage to prep for the LSAT. And I've got to be quite honest, I don't really know if it helped or not, because we both ended up kind of making average scores. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And thank you so much once again for the support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And all right. Man. But anyways, moving on to our next super chat, we have a $10 donation from Neil Vizanant, and this is not his first super chat, unlike what YouTube said, but thank you very much, Neil, for the support. He says, I noticed the red Z on the captured Russian tank, and does that mean it used to belong to Nutsack? Also, I thought we liked the Ukrainians, and why are we sending them Ford trucks? Oh, damn.
Oh, goodness. Shots fired. The 4 people get a bit angry. But still, to answer that, I think it may have been. The Red Zs were a Wagner thing. Maybe the Russians took the Wagner tank, because they took them after all, and then they just moved it up to the line and never painted over the Z, so it's just a Red Z tank. But yeah, that would have meant at one time it was a Wagner tank. And also, we do like the Ukrainians. That's why we send them Toyotas, too. Toyota Hiluxes, the most versatile pickup truck in the history of the world. You could see them everywhere. Afghanistan, Iraq. You could see them being used by the good guys, the okay guys, the somewhat not so okay guys, the guys that make you go, those aren't really good guys, and then the guys that go, oh my god, they're terrorists. Everyone in between. So we do send them some good stuff. It's just that every once in a while, Fords get thrown in the mix. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. Thank you so much once again for the support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
I can only imagine if Toyota gets like a massive order for like 200 to 300 Hiluxes at one time going, overseas, that surely they look and they think, that's kind of interesting. Why do they want so many? But I'm sure that they're just like, oh, whatever, make the Hiluxes and send them. And they don't ask any questions about it.
Perhaps. I wonder if anyone ever shows up, Matthew, in the offices in all black. And they're sitting there with their faces covered up, and they sit there and they have a translator, and they say, we got like 300 Hiluxes, and they go, something rubs me wrong about this. Cash or credit? They do something like that. But anyways.
Would you like financing with that?
Y'all happen to finance? Do you have a bank that you can run this through? Our bank is in Switzerland. Yes. It's all coming together now. This sounds like a great deal.
And then the salesman's like, would you like some kind of like insurance plan with that? Like, are you worried about your transmission or your engine? Oh no, like they reject everything. We want no insurance.
No, they reject
nothing.
They reject everything but the sand protection package. That's the only thing they accept. Everything else, nah, it's just all omitted. But anyways, with that, hope that does address that fairly well. But the Hilux, and with that, we're on to the next one.
And the next one is from Psyops yet again, and he puts in a $10 donation. He says, many people are being actively lied to about Ukraine by certain cough media. This may be people's first exposure to the real Ukraine war information, and sometime we need to fully explain things.
And I certainly agree with that, Psyops, and I got to thank you for the support. That's one thing that is always a little bit of a battle, because viewers that know things don't really like to hear that stuff, going over it at like an entry level to explaining the basics of things, because they think it's patronizing to them. I don't know why people feel like that, because, it's like, oh, the world doesn't revolve around one viewer. There are 7,000 people on here live at the peak every night, nearly. And so I'm trying to think about maybe the few thousand people, the 2,000 people who may be in here, who may have just hopped in today and have never seen anything about the war or anything in detail at all. And I don't want to sit there and say, here's a T-72B3 or here's an armored car and here's how everything's working on the front and all that stuff. You want to break it down a little bit and be like, okay, well, here's why all of this is the way it is. Because, if you don't explain that stuff, they might not know why you're saying that stuff. And that's what I always think about is, folks are new here, and there are new folks who watch because our neighbors watch this show every once in a while. And so, they don't, I don't know if they know a lot about the military much at all. So I always want to make sure to try and bring them up to speed. And I know a lot of people who don't really care much about the militaristic side of things. They just care about you supporting Ukraine. And I think it's important to make sure to try and bring them up to speed on the stuff that matters on the militaristic side of things. But as far as the news goes, the news lies to everyone. Every bit of news lies to everyone, whether it be CNN, Fox, ABC, MSNBC, CBS, anyone. I feel like they all lie to an extent. CNN makes it seem like it's it's a freaking Holocaust going on, and it's just a tragedy from start to finish, and one that the Ukrainians are just in complete despair about. And they never show the side where the Ukrainians are cheering on their army and they're wanting them to continue to fight and eventually regain their territory. They never show that side of the story on CNN, which I think is absolutely misleading to the public, because it makes it look like everyone in Ukraine is just under like drudgery and misery as this war is going on, although they are rooting on with the Ukrainian government to have this war end with a Ukrainian victory, not just end at some kind of an armistice or a peace treaty or anything like that. And then, of course, many of y'all know of folks who now aren't a part of Fox, like Tucker Carlson, who are just anti-Ukraine to the max. It doesn't even really make any sense. And then the arguments that they make for being anti-Ukrainian don't even really make any sense. And just talking about him, I always found it a little funny that, he sits there, and just talking about this, we're just going to talk about this as a standpoint thing from his other points and how they contradict. How on Ukraine, he sits there and says, why are we sending money to Ukraine when we could help out the homeless and the impoverished. And it's like, but I thought your arguments before the war were that those folks ought to just get a job and they shouldn't be leeching off the government. You know, it's like, that was a complete reversal right there, just based on the circumstance. You know, and that's something I'm like, that doesn't even make any sense. It doesn't even follow anything else you said before. But moving on from that, Fox News also carries on that largely as well, and they don't really portray the war well. And also, even just in our local area, there are radio shows. I remember one time Matthew and me were riding around with some friends on one of the few off days that we have on Monday, and we turned on the radio, and someone was on there, and they literally just did this. Do you remember this, Matthew? The Russians are beating Ukraine's ass. The Ukrainians are losing. They are losing. And then they didn't even back it up with any facts or anything. Like, the Russians have taken such and such place. They just said they are losing. Although that day, the Ukrainians had conducted one of the offensives just south of Bakhmut and had moved forward like a mile and a half. It's like, what the hell are you talking about? It's like, you're not even backing that up with facts. And, you know, that's one thing that you see all over the news, is that nobody really talks about anything like that. And it's like, you know, hopefully these folks are learning something when they come on our show. You know, not saying that we are, you know, perfect or anything, but hopefully we're better than the alternatives. That's one thing I'm hoping. But with that, thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next we have a $10 super chat from Craig Platel, who says, Baltics didn't suddenly decide to leave the Russian grid. The process started in 2018, and Ukraine started in 2017, 3 years after Crimea, and you can't just flip a switch to do it. But here's one thing that I see that's potentially a problem with that statement. Not saying that it's untrue, but surely it wouldn't take almost 10 years to disconnect from the grid. I'm not sure if I buy that. Because if they're expecting to be done by 2025, and that's the estimate, then that would have been quite some time. That would have been almost 7 or 8 years or something like that for them to basically finish the process. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say thank you for sharing that, but it does sound like that's a very long time to switch grids. And so with that, thank you for the support and sharing that with us. I hope that does address that fairly well. And also, I see some people in the live chat, and, you know, this is why I always regret talking about anything, even when we try and take a neutral stance. Some people are trying to force us into making a stance by saying, but it's one side that hates Ukraine. If that was the case, why in the world are we still supporting Ukraine? Why in the world is budgeting being sent over? You see, there are a few in one side that don't support Ukraine, but you see, the thing is that they aren't really the ones in charge right now. So it's natural for the ones who are not in charge to be the push to the pull, or the pull to the push. That's just natural. If it was the other side that wasn't in charge, you would see them then do that as well. If you want an example of that, just go look at the Iraq War and watch the leadership change from one party to the next, and then watch the parties magically flip from being pro being in Iraq to anti being in Iraq. That's just how it works. And if you ever go and look at the votes and how the votes go for these appropriations bills for Ukraine, you will notice that it is almost 3/4, for the most part, support in the vote for sending more support to Ukraine, showing that it isn't, you know, it's not the way people are trying to make it out to be. I would say largely the common sense thing is that people understand it as a strategic necessity to support Ukraine. There are some people in the government, however, that are trying to be the counterculture, or more so the counter to what's going on right now and what's the trend, because that just naturally pops up in a government whenever anything happens. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And also to the person in the live chat to say, could you guys possibly cut down on the fluff? Well, we do have something for you. It's called a daily short war summary, and we release that every single day if the news is good and enough to cover in a video, and it's usually in the middle of the day. So that is probably what you're looking for. It's 10 minutes long, and we cover everything that happens up to that point throughout the day. So go check that out if you haven't. And moving on to our next super chat, we have an $8 donation from, I believe this is 1,000 feet. It's the Chinese characters once again, and we don't have any comment behind it. But I saw them saying "Slava Ukraine" in the live chat, so Hiram Slava. And Enforcer, what say you?
And thank you, 1,000 feet. That's got to be one of the funniest names we have in here. I think it's actually kind of cool. But thank you, 1,000 feet, for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. With that support, you are helping us to march another 1,000 feet forward. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much once again.
All right, and the next one goes to Jack Falstaff, who puts in a 6 and says, there's liars, then damned liars, and then attorneys, and then there's statisticians. Man, what did statisticians do to get put in that category? Come on.
Yeah, man. Like, just going to beef on the statisticians for no reasons. That's like beefing on accountants. They haven't done anything wrong. So thank you for the support. And I would have to say that hierarchy is most likely accurate. And so thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a 5 from CK Bold, who says, take a live chat question. We also have a 5 from James Moon, who says, take a live chat question. So we'll get 2 of them in honor of both of you. And thank you very much for the support. And the 2 live chat questions. The first is going to go to, goes to Ed B, who says, do you guys think the Baltic nations could take back Kaliningrad? I saw some analysts discussing that today.
I think that they could, but that doesn't really factor in that the Russians have a massive land border with those countries, and if the war in Ukraine was over, it was kind of rounding out, that also makes NATO look like an aggressor, and so I don't really know how that would unfold. But I would have to honestly say no. I don't think that would be entirely practical, possible, or really even justified, really. So with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And thank you so much once again for helping this channel to keep on rolling. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next live chat question goes to Richard Rody, who says, did the path of the drone and missile attack on the Izmail port pass over Romanian territory? And no, I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't think it did. I think it actually passed over Ukrainian territory all the way to its target. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. Thank you so much once again for the support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Cliff H, who puts in a 5 and says, do you think Poland should go ahead and shoot down any further military airspace intrusions from Belarus?
100% certainly. I think any airspace intrusions, whether it be a kilometer or several kilometers, should be shot down without any delay. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. Thank you so much once again for the support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Lucas Sandlin, who puts in a 5 and says, just saw the Oppenheimer movie and it was the bomb. I'm assuming there was no pun intended there. But he says, also got my second half of my CompTIA A+ cert test coming up. Chuga chuga and Slav Ukraine.
And thank you so much for the support. And great to hear that Oppenheimer is good. One day, we'll see it. One day. But with that, thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address that fairly well. And I hope you have a fun time with those certification tests. And I hope that you pass with flying colors. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and Cliff Wolf just said, send in super chat question. And guess what? We have a super chat from Cliff Wolf, who puts in a 5.
No way!
It says, please discuss M58 Miklix and why it's run into significant problems in Ukraine.
I haven't seen them run into significant problems in Ukraine, honestly. But the Miklik is a mine-clearing device that can be mounted onto a vehicle, or it could be a standalone system that fires off a line charge into a field, and then it explodes. And the theory behind it is that it'll clear the mines that are in the way. We've also seen these used against infantry, by the way, just as a high explosive, and it appears to be very effective in that role as well. I haven't seen it run into issues, to be quite honest with you, in Ukraine. It appears that the Ukrainians have actually started to rely heavily on M58 Mikliks to clear the paths for tanks and infantry moving through the minefields in the south. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on rolling. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next we have a 5 from Russ Rizzo, and he says, I like your economic policy, and when you become president, simply double everyone's budget and see how much better life will be. You know what, though? If somebody's doubling their budget, does that simply mean that they... Well, never mind, that was a stupid comment. That proved it for a fact that I know nothing about economics. But Enforcer, what say you?
And I thank you so much for the support, Russ Rizzo, and I thank you for liking my economic policy. As president, I will be making sure to give everyone in the United States an additional $50,000 US a pop. That will make sure to devastate the national economy. Because while lending and building up national debt is kind of different as far as inflation goes, just giving people in the United States, like every citizen, a set amount of extra cash, that will cause inflation. Because the thing about the money that the government prints up is that the government spends it. And so it doesn't really make it into the national or the global economy the same way it would make it into the national or global economy if you gave it to citizens that buy consumer goods. That would directly correlate to massive increases in inflation from how I understand economics to work, but keep in mind I'm not an expert. So that's what I would say. And so I thank you so much for the support, Russ, and please make sure to vote for me for president in 2040. Because while I say things like that, I do understand that you have to limit the spending. That's something that I know. But do our prior presidents know that? I would say no. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. Thank you so much once again for the support. I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. And with that being said, we're moving on to our live chat questions. And up first, we have the Morse code decoders of the stream. We have Cliff Simonson, Mark Hodges, Earl Renew, and Paul Schultz. And and they said tonight's Morse code cipher is Russian tanks burn nicer than Kingsford charcoal. And we aren't sponsored by them, I swear. Long live the LSA.
That's the sound of money, and y'all got that right on the nail. That is the exact answer that we're looking for, and that was the Morse code message. I gotta thank y'all so much once again for y'all's amazing Morse code decoding skills. They absolutely blow away the Lee Spring Army each and every night that y'all do that, and I have to say, absolutely incredible. Good job on all of y'all, and that was the message of the night. Y'all got that right on the nail. And some people are going to say, why does he sound like a baseball announcer? I don't know. That's just my cadence. Live with it, will you? But anyways, for that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next, we have another super chat. This one is from Victorious, who puts in a 5 and says, Ukraine, a nation with strength untold. From Kiev to Lviv, a story unfolds, and resilient hearts united as one in the land of courage. Victories are won.
Damn, that's a poem.
That's a poem.
Dude, that's a poem. I might not know maths, but I know English when I see it, and that right there is a damn poem. And I gotta thank you so much for that, because that was a really good poem, I'm not gonna lie. So very good job, Victorious. And thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because folks like you make it possible. And so with that, we are on to the next one, but thank you so much once again.
All right, and our first live chat question is going to go to AF Kaplan, who says, regarding Putler going to see Erdogan, isn't Turkey a signatory of the ICC convention? And if yes, doesn't Turkey have to arrest Putler if he goes to the country?
I believe they are, and I believe they would have to. South Africa is also a signer of that convention, and they said that if Putin arrived in South Africa, he would be arrested. And so, Lavrov was actually sent his stay, and when he arrived and started to talk to the delegation there, he went and he ate some apples and some sugar cubes. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Doughboy, who says, do you think that China had anything to do with Russia going back to the grain deal, seeing that China gets a good portion of the grain?
That may be a little bit of a background reason why is that the Chinese are putting pressure on them so that way they can make sure to keep grain, not gain, but grain prices low. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And we are on to the next one.
And we have a question from Space Karen, who says, do anti-drone devices affect drones that use 4G LTE control over RC and Wi-Fi? If not, that would be optimal.
That is an amazing question, an absolutely incredible one that many experts will like to have the answer to. Unfortunately, I'm not a tech expert, and I don't really know much about how drone controllers like that will function under those kinds of atmospheres and conditions. If you would like to have an answer to that, I would make sure to reach out to your drone provider, most likely DJI, and ask them that question yourself, because I believe a certified technician of DJI drones would most likely be more suited to answer that question than I would be, considering that I have no knowledge or information on that subject matter. But thank you so much once again for an interesting question, and hopefully I wish you the best on your endeavor to find an answer to that question with expedience. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Anita K, who says Russia's constantly and repeatedly testing its limits with us in NATO, and fear of escalation can't paralyze us forever, so why don't we react and deter?
I believe we should. I think that's something that we should certainly start working on, but once again, that is a very big step to take, and you have to remember that millions of lives, hundreds of millions of lives are at stake with those kinds of decisions. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, and also remind everyone of the weight of those kinds of decisions being made. And with that, we are on to the third to last one of the night.
And this one goes to Buddy. He says the U.S. is for 40% dependent for uranium on Russia, and still is, and why always point to Europe? At least we almost stopped using Russian gas completely. And I want to say this real quick, because I made some comments earlier that I got some flack for about Europe and also their dependence on Russian energy. People always want to take that, especially Europeans want to take that as us taking shots at Europe. But that's not the case. I'm not saying the U.S. doesn't have faults either. We've definitely made mistakes when it comes to energy as well. But, you know, I have a feeling that there is a slight insecurity in Europe when it comes to the U.S. pointing fingers at them. I'm not trying to be hypocritical when I say things about that, but I do believe that these Baltic states should have been more proactive in making sure that they were ready to get off of the energy before now, because now crap has hit the fan and they're having to do it in a rush, and they could have had this done ahead of time because the warning signs were there that something was going to happen. We didn't know exactly what was going to happen, but they definitely weren't proactive. And also, that's not taking a shot, that's just fact. But Enforcer, what say you?
And I thank you so much for bringing in such an interesting point right there. And I would also have to say, fairly interesting indeed. Indeed. I don't even really know what the question was at this point. I kind of forgot it after you mentioned it. But with that, I hope we addressed it fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have another super chat from Walter A. Lakota Jr., who puts in a 5 and says, me again. Hawaii fun fact. Kilauea Volcano is the world's tallest mountain from base to peak.
And would you look at that? There it is. Right there. And that is very interesting. And I think I've actually heard that before. They say that from the bottom of the ocean to its very peak, it is taller than Mount Everest, but sadly, due to everything only being measured above sea level, Mount Everest then takes the title of the tallest mountain, because it is the tallest mountain above sea level. But still, very interesting fun fact. And I actually knew that when someone told me that in like 7th grade in school. It was just like the weirdest fun fact to learn in 7th grade, but I still remember it to this day. And thank you once again, Walter A. Lakota, for being our Hawaii fun fact guy. And so with that, thank you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that fairly well. And we are on to the second to last question of the night.
All right. And this is actually the last one of the night because
What?
I'm out of questions.
No way.
No cap.
So with that, what do we... Wait a minute. We are on to the final question of the night. And so, who was the lucky last person to put in that lucky last question of the night?
And that viewer is Marcia Tucker, who says, did you see that RF will be requiring everyone in Russia to install certain apps on their phones and smart devices to receive information, i.e. propaganda, and more brainwashing?
I did see that. That was actually, I think, a good while ago they started doing that, but I believe from what I've been hearing lately, they're trying to ramp up those efforts and ensure that that is happening. And that is something that is really bizarre when you think about it, is that they are trying to force people to install propaganda onto their own personal devices. But that is the Russian world for you, and that's what about 70 years of communism gets you, is propaganda forced onto you by the government. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, it is the end of tonight's stream. I thank you all so much once again for watching. It's been an absolute pleasure running the stream with all of y'all, and I hope y'all have enjoyed it greatly. If y'all did, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, as this stream runs 6 days a week, every single day of the week except for Mondays at 10 p.m. Eastern Time every single night, covering the past 24 hours of the war in picture and video evidence. It is a spectacle and an extravaganza like no other, and it is something that shows the story and the perseverance of the brave Ukrainians that continue to fight and struggle against the Russian invasion each and every day. And speaking of which, Devin Harris just put in a $5 super chat and said, do you know something about Russian digital rubles is designed to circumvent the sanctions restrictions? And I actually didn't know that. That's a really interesting fun fact to know. And that's some of the stuff that we also cover in our daily summaries as well every once in a while. We usually put those out daily, but sometimes there's just an overall lack of news at that point in the day, and so we can't put one out. But you can largely expect those to come out almost every single day at around 1 p.m. to 2 p.m. Eastern Time, covering the events of the war and the major highlights of the day in about 12 to 15 minutes. And so if you're one of those people who come onto a live stream where it is supposed to be a fun time to talk with the viewers and everything, and then ask, why the hell is there so much fluff? One, why are you on a live stream if you don't want fluff? That's kind of what live streams are. And two, you would probably like our short war summaries in the middle of the day a lot more. That's probably more up your alley. So check those out instead. But with that, thank you all so much once again for watching. Good night, good luck, take care, stay safe, Slava Ukraini, and long live the Lee Spring Army. The Lee Spring Army never dies.
And good night, LSA. Slava Ukraine. Hiram Slava. And peep the Twitter. It's good for your health. But it hasn't helped me for some reason. But good night.
Yes.
The Lee Spring Army sends its regards.
Русский военный корабль. Предлагаю сложить оружие и сдаться. Русский военный корабль, иди нахуй.